Chapter 1912. There was not much time left until Yin Xianlu's appointment. Ling Han made good use of his time and continued to improve his alchemy abilities. In martial art, he had already reached the peak stage of the fourth severance and could not possibly improve any further. Neither he nor the Empress had refined the heavenly Tao Jade. Rather, they were waiting for an opportunity, such as exchanging blows with the supreme prodigy of the present age, and personally feeling the aura of a fifth severance. Then, they would refine the heavenly Tao Jade, and perhaps they would be able to succeed in a single step. Ling Han was immersed in alchemy. Perhaps he would obtain a breakthrough in alchemy, and in passing, he would open the door to martial art. Bewitching Maiden Ro was filled with anticipation. At first, she had only been in the circle of holy sons and holy daughters of 3-star forces. And now, not only had she advanced into 5-star forces, but those that could receive an invitation from Yin Xianlu were definitely not qualified to be the heirs of ordinary Celestial King tier-level sections. They had to be top-notch Emperor tiers, stronger than even Zhao Qingfeng. Otherwise, they would only be worthy of being his subordinate. And how could they be qualified to be his honored guest? Yin Xianlu, what kind of prodigy is he? Ling Han and the Empress were both very curious. Ever since they entered into the Eternal Prosperity sect, there were people everywhere talking about Yin Xianlu's legend. He was just like the second Eternal Prosperity Celestial King. No one doubted whether Yin Xianlu could become a Celestial King, but rather wondered what heights he could reach in the future. 5, 7, 8, even 9. At the foot of Three Yang Peak, people came one after another, but no one ascended the mountain. Because no one could ascend it. Ling Han had tried previously, but he could not ascend either. There was a supreme pressure, and even the 9 heavens flame and Xianing source water could not resist it. Because this was not pure pressure, but also the will of a supreme elite's martial art. Taking a step back, even if it was pure pressure, this came from an 8th heaven Celestial King. And the source power of heaven and earth was only Celestial King tier level. But Celestial Kings were also divided into 9 heavens. Perhaps it could only be comparable to the 1st heaven, or possibly the 9th heaven, and the possibility of being able to oppose an 8th heaven Celestial King was very small. How was he to ascend it? Even 2 source powers of heaven and earth could do nothing, and even if Yin Xianlu was a 5th severance, Ling Han did not believe that he could set foot on it. Perhaps, it was just like some kind of secret realm, where one could not enter at any time. One had to wait for the opening time. The day the Eternal Prosperity Celestial King attained Tao. It should be this day. And that was why Yin Xianlu had said that the 3 stars would converge. More and more people arrived, and they were all waiting at the side. Some people did indeed try to ascend the peak, but they were quickly defeated with flushed faces. Before the pressure of an immortal king, even if one was a peerless genius, one could only stare at the peak and sigh powerlessly. The Empress and bewitching Maiden Ro were exceptionally eye-catching. There was no need to say anything more about bewitching Maiden Ro. She was naturally delicate and charming, and though she was not attracted to men, her seductiveness was off the charts. The Empress was still very low-key. She had covered her beautiful face with a white veil, hiding her exquisite features, but her perfect figure and unparalleled bearing could not be hidden no matter what. Her attractiveness was definitely not inferior to bewitching Maiden Ro's. Since they had nothing to do, many people began to admire the 2 women. Some were more reserved, while others were more direct. They were so open and aboveboard, without any scruples. Well, that was everyone's right, but to stare fixedly at them, was that appropriate? Ling Han strode over and arrived in front of a person. Hey, you're blocking me. This was a tall young man with a head of dark blue hair. There were also 2 horns on his head, and they were similarly exuding a dark blue light. Ling Han frowned and said, "You keep staring at others like that. It is very rude." Haha. The blue-haired young man threw his head back and laughed loudly. Then he looked at Ling Han and said, "Ugly, haven't you heard of the saying? A beauty is paired with a hero." "Oh, so you are a hero," Ling Han said calmly. "That's right. I, Zhu Xuega, am the strongest prodigy in the whole world." The blue-haired young man stretched out a finger and tapped his own chest. Hee, what a bold claim. Ling Han had yet to speak, But someone had already coldly followed up. Those that could be invited here. Which one of them was not a supreme prodigy? It should be known that even Zhao Qingfeng was only Yin Xianlu's subordinate, and was not qualified to become a guest. This kind of emperor tier, or even monarch tier, how could they submit to anyone? And who are you? Zhu Xuega turned around, and shouted at that person, his tone extremely unfriendly. Lu Feizhang. This young man that had interfered said proudly. Never heard of you. Zhu Xuega scoffed. Then you know now, and you will remember it for the rest of your life, because I am the person who gave you a crushing defeat. Lu Feizhang moved brazenly, his right hand stretching out, turning into a massive golden beast claw that grabbed at Zhu Xuega. Haha, you are seeking your own humiliation. Zhu Xuega was not the slightest bit afraid. His hands danced and a dark blue sea appeared. There was the sound of waves crashing against the shore, and it greeted Lu Feizhang's attack with the momentum of toppling mountains and overturning seas. The two young prodigies engaged in a great battle. They were both outstanding figures in the severing mundane tier. Even if neither of them had reached the fifth severance, in the vacuum between the severing mundane tier and dividing soul tier, they had traveled a very long distance, and their battle prowess was incredibly shocking. Ling Han was astonished. Why had his business been snatched away? He rubbed his chin. Could it be that he really had a halo of bad luck? Otherwise, why had everything been fine just now? And he had only opened his mouth to say a few words, and someone had already made a move. Though he was eager and very much wanted to make a move. After all, he had been concocting alchemical pills for these 3 years, and had not had the chance to make a move. Firstly, he disdained to join forces with others, and secondly, he was too embarrassed to make a move on Lu Feizhang, so he could only retreat in disappointment. Yo, Lord Holy Sun wants to fly into a rage for the sake of a beauty? Bewitching Maiden Ro covered her mouth and giggled lightly, her beautiful figure trembling, incredibly enchanting. Unfortunately, your business has been snatched away by someone else. Do you believe that I will spank your bottom? Ling Han threatened. Do you have the heart to do that? Bewitching Maiden Ro looked aggrieved, delicate and pitiful. Pretend Ling Han scoffed and said, Bewitching Maiden, don't get carried away. I will eat you up, wipe my bottom and leave. Who are you going to complain to? Bewitching Maiden Ro's heart clenched. If it was any other man, she was confident that she would be able to play them like a fiddle, and toy with them in the palm of her hand. But Ling Han was really different from the rest. His heart was practically made of iron. If she really made him sleep with her, how could a mere holy daughter of a 3-star force seek justice from the future chairperson of a 4-star force? Seeing that he had subdued Bewitching Maiden Ro, Ling Han relaxed internally. Even he had to admit that Bewitching Maiden Ro had charm. But the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had allowed her to follow? Husband, not only can you stir up trouble yourself, you can also affect others, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden said with a smile. At this moment, Lu Feizhang and Zhu Xuega were also fighting for real. The two great prodigies displayed all they could, and were like the sun at high noon. The Empress had been present all this while, her expression slightly grim. After a while she said, These two people are both very strong. If I do not use my trump card, I will only be able to fight them to a draw at most. Ling Han nodded. These two people were not just a little bit stronger than Zhao Qingfeng. The Empress did not overestimate them, nor did she belittle herself. She was speaking the truth. Furthermore, the Empress had a trump card. But did these two not have one as well? You should be able to defeat them easily, the Empress continued, her tone incredibly certain. Chapter 1913. Ling Han broke into a smile. He had now reached the peak stage of the 4th severance, and only needed an opportunity to advance into the 5th severance. He had definitely cultivated the 4th severance to a flawless level, added with the fact that he had too many trump cards, and merely 2 source powers of heaven and earth were enough to make even a celestial king blush with shame. In a battle of equals, it would be strange if he did not win. However, the Empress had not refined the heavenly Tao Jade yet. If she could still complete the leap of the Dragon's Gate, she would be pushing open a completely new door, and raising her battle prowess to the true pinnacle. Like Yin Xianlu? 5th severance. Were there any 5th severance elites here? Ling Han's eyes swept over them. Though each and every prodigy was brimming with arrogance and possessed astonishing confidence, all of their auras were incredibly reserved, and it was completely impossible to detect them. I am Dongmin Hong, and my hands are itching. Who would like to battle with me? A tall and sturdy man jumped out. He was incredibly bold, and had already drawn out a purple machete that was as long as 3 meters, and began to issue a challenge to the others. I'll go. A yellow-robed young man jumped out, and did not say any more superfluous words, immediately beginning a fierce battle with Dongmin Hong. Prodigies like them were all fanatics in martial art. Seeing that there were already 2 pairs that had begun a fierce battle, and were indeed of extremely high level, not the slightest bit inferior to themselves, they couldn't help but feel their fighting spirit stirring. More and more people entered the battlefield, and a fierce battle unfolded. Then it became a chaotic battle. In the end, there was no longer any distinction between opponents, and they would attack anyone they saw. It was really a mess. Only a few people had not been swept into the battle, and stood slightly further away, crossing their arms over their chests. Brother Lao, when Yin Xianlu arrives later, he might die of anger when he sees this scene, right? A spectator said with a smile. His eyes swept over the chaotic battle, but his eyes were filled with disdain. Beside him was a purple-robed young man. His appearance was incredibly handsome, and his skin was also a little too fair. His skin was as soft and tender as a woman's. Not only that, his features were too delicate, and his brows were thin and long, appearing very feminine. If it wasn't for his Adam's apple, one would have thought that he was a woman disguised as a man, and a failure at that. The purple-clothed youth laughed, revealing 2 rows of snow-white teeth that were as thin as shells. If you were to make a move, you would be able to subdue all of them in one move. As he spoke, one could hear that his voice was sharp and thin, as if he was a eunuch. Logically speaking, even if one was a eunuch, after cultivating to the celestial realm, any organ could be regenerated. There was no such thing as a cripple. Haha, that's Yin Xianlu's business. What does it have to do with me? The first person said. He was dressed in a white robe that was not tainted by a speck of dust, appearing extremely carefree. The purple-clothed youth laughed again. Then what did you say? I heard that you are very interested in Yin Xianlu. Isn't this creating a chance for you to get closer to Yin Xianlu? The young man in white asked with a smile. Swoosh! The purple-robed young man suddenly attacked. His right hand was so soft that it seemed to be boneless. It turned into a snake, and it was a golden snake. The snake opened its mouth wide, revealing 2 fangs as it bit towards the white-robed young man. A terrifying aura spread out. Hong, with a tremor, the chaotic battle instantly came to an abrupt end, and everyone came over. It was too frightening. It was as if they had encountered a source beast of heaven and earth that was currently showing its might towards them. Ha ha ha, Lao Song. I just knew that you are the most vicious. The white-robed young man pressed down. Hong. A white screen of light appeared in front of him. Multiple symbols of great Tao bloomed, able to suppress the heavens and stabilize the universe. Hong, the golden snake, bit down, but could do nothing against this white screen of light. Shan Jidong, are you seeking death? Lao Song asked menacingly, his voice shockingly shrill. That would still depend on whether you have that kind of strength. The white-robed young man, Shan Jitong, laughed loudly, not the slightest bit afraid. The 2 young elites faced off, a boundless aura spreading out. A large snake appeared behind Lao Song. It was completely golden, and there were multiple symbols of great Tao on its body, but not a single one was clear, as if it was in chaos. The large snake coiled its body, and was at least 30,000 meters tall. Its aura was astonishing, as if it could shatter the heavens with a light movement. Behind Shan Jitong, a phenomenon similarly appeared. That was a white sword that looked as if it was forged from jade. It looked like it would shatter with a single touch, yet it was completely capable of resisting that large snake's might. 5th Severance. Ling Han and the Empress exchanged a look, and spat out 2 words at the same time. A 4th Severance definitely could not be this strong. Only a 5th Severance could reach this kind of height. Merely its aura could make severing mundane tears feel as if they were facing an abyss, their hearts trembling. True enough, aside from Yin Xianlu, There were other fifth severance elites in the prodigy gathering this time. That's the source snake of heaven and earth, bewitching maiden Rose said in a trembling voice, her pretty face panicked. There was an indescribable terror. Source snake. Ling Han had heard of source powers of heaven and earth, such as the nine heavens flame and Xianin source water. He also knew of the chaos source rock, which was said to be the earliest rock formed when the heaven and earth were created. But what was a source snake? When the heaven and earth were created, there was originally nothing, but as the heaven and earth were perfected, the first batch of life appeared, and they were all called source ancestors. Small Tower suddenly spoke up. The first dragon in the world was called the ancestral dragon, source dragon, and the first phoenix in the world was called the ancestral phoenix, source phoenix. Then, the first snake born in the world was called the source snake. The ancestor of all snakes, source snake. What level is it? Ling Han asked. The source ancestors are definitely celestial kings, but different source seeds can reach different heights in the celestial king tier, Small Tower said. The strongest are naturally the ancestral dragon, ancestral phoenix, and the like. The ancestral snake is not weak either. It could be 7th heaven or 8th heaven. If there is no special opportunity, there should never be any hope of reaching 9th heaven. Ling Han nodded. This Lao Song had to be the descendant of the source snake, though it was unknown whether he was a snake that had taken human form, or he was originally human and had gone to cultivate the techniques of the source snake. Thinking about it, the possibility of the latter was not high. It should be a descendant of the source snake that could reach such heights. Ling Han's battle blood was boiling. There was more than 1/5 severance here, and perhaps just the battle of these people would be enough for him to complete his breakthrough. He and the Empress both had to be careful. This was the first time they had truly become a 5th severance elite, and merely sensing that kind of aura could give them a sliver of a possibility of breaking through. Hee brother Lao, brother Shan, what is going on? Even if I have not treated you well, there is no need for the two of you to fight, right? There was a long laugh, and a young man in embroidered robes stepped through the air, his speed extremely fast. There were 3 other young people behind him, 2 men and 1 woman, all of whom had the bearing of dragons and phoenixes among men. Yin Xianlu, Lao Song and Shan Jitong both stopped their confrontation and walked towards this young man in embroidered robes, showing a strong expression of wariness. A 4th severance would never be able to imagine Yin Xianlu's strength. Only they who were similarly 5th severance freaks knew how strong this young man was. It was practically enough to make one despair. A divine fetus born on the celestial path was born close to Tao, and could learn any celestial technique with a single learning, and master it in a short while, even surpassing the person who had created this technique. This really could be a strange fetus born from heaven and earth, destined to be unparalleled. Ling Han couldn't help but be greatly interested, and walked towards Yin Xianlu. He had heard of this person countless times, so much so that calluses were about to form, but he had always been reluctant to meet him. Chapter 1914. Yin Xianlu's appearance was handsome, but not earth-shatteringly handsome like Lao Song's, but only average handsomeness. But when Yin Xianlu appeared, whether it was Lao Song or Shan Jidong, their elegance was overshadowed, as if they had become Yin Xianlu's foil, dim and lackluster. They were both 5th severance, but there was actually such a huge gap between them. The king of the celestial path was definitely not a boast. Yin Xianlu's expression was calm, but the 3 followers behind him felt a sliver of anger from their master. He had invited someone over to keep the appointment, but the host had not even arrived, and the guests were actually fighting. Did they think that just because he had not witnessed it with his own eyes, he could not tell that a great battle royale had once taken place here? If news of this spread, it would really be a joke. Someone actually dared to make trouble at the banquet that he, Yin Xianlu, was holding. Just playing around to pass the time, Shan Jitong said smilingly, his figure standing as straight as a sword. He naturally could not show any weakness in front of Yin Xianlu. A 5th severance was a monarch tier, so how could a monarch tier possibly fear anyone? Meanwhile, Lao Song stared at Yin Xianlu with a feminine gaze. His eyes were glowing green, and there was an indescribable feeling in his gaze. Previously, Shan Jidong had mocked him for being interested in Yin Xianlu. And that was not just empty words. There really was such a possibility. Yin Xianlu only smiled slightly and did not ask further. He raised his head. That massive sun was already gradually dimming, and a bright moon was beginning to exude a clear glow. The sky was filled with dazzling starlight. There is still some time until the 3 stars gather, he said calmly. Since everyone is already impatient from waiting, then let's sit down. He was the first to sit down, and his actions seemed to have a strong influence. A considerable number of people did not even realize it themselves, and sat down as well. Then their expressions suddenly changed. Each and every action of this person could actually affect others, and even pique emperor tears like them. There were only a few exceptions, such as Shan Jitong, Lao Song, Ling Han, and the Empress. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was supported by Ling Han, and Bewitching Maiden Ro was supported by the Empress. This was a woman of the Ling family, so how could she be influenced by outsiders? There were 5 others who were still standing. They weren't emperors, but had the potential to break through. Yin Xianlu's eyes roamed about, and when his gaze passed by Ling Han's group, he paused slightly, but immediately shifted his gaze over. Even the Empress and Bewitching Maiden Ro did not attract his attention. This person's willpower was terrifyingly strong. Ling Han smiled at the Empress. The 2 of them took out a stone chair from their spatial god tools, and then sat down. They would sit, but it was definitely not because of Yin Xianlu's orders. Yin Xianlu showed a meaningful smile. His eyes swept over them, and he remembered the few that could stand firm in his heart. This was the group that he wanted to recruit. The rest were mediocre, and he couldn't even be bothered to recruit them as subordinates. Thank you for coming from afar, he said. I've invited all of you here for 2 reasons. One is to discuss martial art together. Hee. Shan Jitong immediately showed a disdainful smile. Yin Xianlu discussing martial art with these people. Have you been kicked in the head by a donkey? Are these people worthy? He was a monarch tier. What king tier or emperor tier was qualified to be his equal? What did you say? A considerable number stood up, their expressions filled with fury. Isn't that so? A bunch of trash. Shan Jitong scoffed. Even if all of you joined forces, I would only need a single finger to suppress you all. What right do you all have to discuss martial art with me? Isn't this a joke? Come and try. A green-robed youth jumped out. There were 3 silver horizontal lines on his forehead. Shan Jitong glanced at him, and disdainfully said, Silver Toad Race. I remember that a so-called prodigy appeared in your race, called Ha Ming or something. He was suppressed by me in 3 moves, unable to withstand a single blow. The green-robed youth's expression suddenly changed. He pointed at Shan Jitong, and involuntarily exclaimed, You are the 7 Swords Demon King. And now, you still want to exchange blows with me? Shan Jitong asked calmly. The green-robed youth's face alternated between red and green. Yet he turned around and left, directly fleeing. The Ha Ming that Shan Jitong spoke of was a senior, that was several generations older than him. When he had been in the Severing Mundane tier, he had also been invincible, and was viewed by the race as the person most likely to become a celestial king. But once, when Ha Ming had gone out to train, he had been horribly defeated by a Severing Mundane tier. From then on, his Tao heart had been completely lost, and he had become immortal. This person who had defeated him was called the 7 Swords Demon King, because all his opponents would definitely be defeated within 7 strikes. The green-robed youth did not know that this 7 Swords Demon King was Shan Jitong. Otherwise, he definitely would not dare to provoke the latter. Previously, when Ha Ming had been defeated, Shan Jitong had still been a 4th severance. The 2 of them had been at the same cultivation level, and there was no suppression of cultivation level. And the green-robed youth knew his own limitations. Whether it was his natural talent in martial art or strength, he was much weaker than Ha Ming, who was at the same cultivation level. He did not want to end up the same as Ha Ming. Everyone was stunned. The green-robed youth was a prodigy that had recently risen up in the Silver Toad race. His cultivation level was at the peak stage of the 4th severance, and his battle prowess was astonishing. But he had actually been scared off by a single sentence from Shan Jitong. This was really unimaginable. Hiss, The Seven Swords Demon King. Only after their shock had passed did they realize that Shan Jitong was that mysterious Seven Swords Demon King. In the past, there had once been a young elite swordsman who went around challenging others, who knew how many severing mundane tier prodigies had been defeated within 7 strikes from him. Some had even had their Dao hearts crumble. But 30,000 years ago, the Seven Swords Demon King had suddenly vanished without a trace. Now that they thought about it, Shan Jitong should have been at the peak stage of the 4th severance at that time. He had gone around challenging others in order to break through to the 5th severance. Obviously, Shan Jitong had succeeded, and so he had disappeared 30,000 years ago. That was because there was no need for him to go around challenging others anymore. Yin Xianlu, what exactly have you invited us here for? Shan Jitong asked impatiently. Though Celestials had an unlimited lifespan, he was not willing to spend it on meaningless things either. Yin Xianlu smiled calmly, yet began to talk about something completely unrelated. This 3-yang peak is the place where my master achieved Dao. When he succeeded, the 3 stars gathered, and the phenomenon was astonishing. This time, it is the anniversary of my master achieving Dao for an entire epoch. My master deduced that there will be another phenomenon in heaven and earth, and those who ascend to the peak will be able to obtain the fortune of heaven and earth. He glanced at Shan Jitong and Lao Song. As expected, the 2 of them looked tempted. He continued, I have not broken through to the dividing soul tier all this while, and it is precisely because I have been waiting for this day. Since there is such a good thing, why would you let us benefit from it? Lao Song asked. Today, when the 3 stars gather, the might of the Celestial King tier here will be at its lowest. But even so, not everyone is qualified to ascend the mountain, Yin Xianlu said calmly. I have never minded competing with others. Furthermore, I still have an important matter. What is it? Shan Jitong asked. Among those present, only he and Lao Song were qualified to speak with Yin Xianlu on equal terms. There is no rush, Yin Xianlu said calmly. If we cannot reach the peak, there is no meaning in listening. Chapter 1916. Shangde was the holy son of the White Sun sect. Though he was not as outstanding as Yin Xianlu, being able to become the holy son of a 6th heaven celestial king tier sect, there was naturally no need to doubt his talent in martial art. If one had to say that he had any shortcoming, it would only be that he was a little dissolute. But which man wasn't dissolute? He moved in a violent rage. Boom! A ball of fiery flames burst out from his body, turning into multiple immortal beasts, each one formed from patterns of great Dao. In comparison, Zhao Qingfeng was practically trash. Ling Han's figure moved, focusing mainly on dodging as he shouted loudly. A great holy son, not only taking advantage of others, you still want to silence them. This shout immediately drew a great many people over. Some even wore expressions of intense disdain. They did not know the cause and effect, and only knew that Shangde had indeed grabbed onto Ling Han's feet. What a strange fetish! Shangde immediately flushed red. He knew that rumors would stop with the wise. Anyone with a bit of a normal brain would know that he, Shangde, liked women. So how could he possibly deliberately touch a man's feet? But now, with so many strange gazes fixed on him, he could not calm down no matter what. You brat, I'm going to kill you, he roared. He had been easily angered by Ling Han. Was this really the holy son of the White Sun sect? Everyone looked at the Shangde who was roaring furiously, their eyes filled with doubt. A holy son, not a holy son from an ordinary celestial king tier force, but a 6th heaven celestial king tier super force. How could he be so easily angered? Heavens! How could such a person possibly become a holy son? How could they know that with Ling Han's mouth, putting aside a mere holy son, even celestial kings could be angered to the point of bursting into rage? However, everyone very quickly showed expressions of shock. This time, it was not because of Shangde, but rather because of Ling Han. This young man was so strong, though he had only been dodging all this while. It should be known that if he was only dodging and did not retaliate at all, and still had the strength to ensure that he would not be injured, the difficulty was far greater than parrying. Which also meant that Ling Han's true strength was definitely not inferior to Shangde's, and might even surpass it. Heavens! How is that possible? They very quickly recognized that Ling Han was the holy son that had been chosen by Alchemy City this time around. But what kind of place was Alchemy City? Putting aside the fact that it was only a 4-star force, even if it was a first heaven celestial king tier sect, how could it compare to the White Sun sect? Moreover, wasn't the holy son of Alchemy City supposed to concoct pills? They had only thought that what Yin Xianlu valued was Ling Han's natural talent in alchemy. This was not strange. After all, Yin Xianlu had not advanced into the celestial king tier, and there was nothing he could use Ling Han for. But only now did they know that Ling Han's ability in martial art was also astonishingly strong, enough to be on par with them, or perhaps even stronger. This was unacceptable to them. A group of geniuses born to excel in martial art actually lost to an alchemist. Damn, at this moment, they were unprecedentedly united, and all of them hoped that Shangde could defeat Ling Han. Otherwise they too would feel humiliated. But no matter how Shangde channeled his celestial techniques, he could not do anything to Ling Han. What made him even more depressed was that though he and Ling Han had already exchanged close to 100 moves, in truth, the two of them had not come into actual physical contact even once. Aside from the very beginning, when he had accidentally grabbed onto Ling Han's foot. Pei. Do you only know how to run? Shangde tried to goad him into action. Cowardly as a mouse, I really don't know what you're cultivating for. In any case, it's not to touch a man's foot, Ling Han said smilingly. When Shangde heard this, his fury immediately flared up again. You still dare to say it. You still dare to say it. I'm going to kill you. In his hands, multiple celestial techniques were channeled, materializing the circulation of great Tao. As expected of the heir that had been nurtured by a 6th heaven celestial king tier sect. If Zhao Qingfeng were to exchange blows with him, he should show signs of defeat within 100 moves. And in a battle to the death, he would definitely die within 1,000 moves. In layman terms, his battle prowess was about the same as the Empress's. Unfortunately, his opponent was Ling Han. Even if Yin Xianlu's cultivation level was suppressed to the 4th severance, it was still unknown who would emerge victorious in a battle with Ling Han. Yin Xianlu had been born on the celestial path, and this was indeed impressive, but Ling Han was not simple, either. He had 2 source powers of heaven and earth, and furthermore had the indestructible heaven scroll, a wondrous technique that was at least at the 9th heaven celestial king tier level. Finally, he had been tempered by the celestial king tier flame, making up for the last shortcoming of his physique. He was completely not inferior to the best holy sons. Shangde was already not enough. Ling Han sighed. At first, he had wanted to use Shangde to temper himself, but the height he presently stood at was a little frightening. Even an heir that had been nurtured by a 6th heaven celestial king tier sect could not give him the slightest bit of pressure. Little Dada, you're a little weak, he said truthfully. If the other's strength was close to his, then if the two of them battled to their fullest, perhaps he could push open the door to the 5th severance. Shangde was stamping with fury. This guy actually dared mock him. He really did not know how the word death was written. You asked for this. His right hand shook, and a 3-meter-long silver spear appeared in his hand. Suddenly, a stern aura spread out, very frightening. Ling Han was slightly moved. He could feel that this spear had the ability to wound him. The treasured spear might be at dividing soul tier. But even if it could not unleash its full might in the hands of a 4th severance, it was still incredibly sharp, and could even pose a threat to his physique. Slightly interesting. Ling Han's interest was piqued, his eyes shining. It's not just slightly interesting. I'm going to send you on your way. Shangde had no qualms at all. So what if he was a holy son of Alchemy City? If he killed him, so be it. He did not believe that Alchemy City would still dare charge into the White Sun sect to demand an explanation. That would really be asking for their own humiliation. Shwa, the silver spear moved, and like a silver dragon it shook the skies. Multiple patterns of great Tao flickered on the spear's body, forcibly tearing the space apart. This was definitely not a pseudo-celestial tool of Yang Soul or Yin Soul tier, but rather something even higher. It was fine if Shangde could not unleash the full might of a pseudo-celestial tool, but the level of the spear itself was too high. If he was touched by the patterns on it, even with Ling Han's physique, he would probably have a hard time. It was a very natural thing for his skin to be torn open. Though Ling Han was not afraid of the other's strength, he did not dare underestimate this pseudo-celestial tool. Immediately, he drew out the divine demon sword and slashed out at the silver spear. Wang! The two treasured tools clashed, and a deafening boom that was enough to shake the galaxy erupted. The shattered rocks in the surroundings all floated up about 3 meters into the air, and then quickly shot up into the sky, gathering to form a dark tornado. Shangda's whole person was also sent flying. The silver spear in his hand was extremely frightening, but his own strength was a great deal inferior to Ling Han's. In a head-on clash, he naturally could not be a match for it. Seeing this scene, everyone's expression changed. Though they had guessed that Ling Han's strength could possibly be stronger, they were finally willing to believe it when they saw it with their own eyes. Fuck, how could you possibly be an alchemist? Chapter 1917. Ling Han gazed at Shangda, who had been sent flying, yet he put the divine demon sword away. There was no time to waste with Shangda now. He had to ascend to the summit as quickly as possible. Only the first person to reach the summit would be able to obtain the great fortune of heaven and earth. Let's go. The Empress nodded, and bewitching Maiden Ro looked very pitiful, looking at Ling Han with a pleading gaze. Ling Han sighed internally. He clearly knew that it was not good to have too much contact with bewitching Maiden Ro, but the bewitching arts that this bewitching maiden cultivated were really not for show. She was subtly influencing him, causing him to accept this person more and more. It wasn't out of lust, but because he saw the other party as a friend. Furthermore, if they left bewitching Maiden Ro here, she would easily be eaten by others. How could a mere 3-star force scare the successors of these celestial king tier level sects? If news of this spread, it was guaranteed that there would be many people who would come back and say that bewitching Maiden Ro was actually trying to climb up the social ladder. Wasn't it easy for him to get beautiful women? He stretched out a hand and pressed down, drawing bewitching Maiden Ro into his spatial god tool. Of course, it could not be the Black Tower. He was still far from trusting this bewitching maiden. Ling Han and the Empress walked side by side. The others stared at his back for a while before following suit. Some people didn't make a move because they didn't have enough confidence. If they made a move, they would only be asking for humiliation. Some people were in a hurry. After all, Ling Han was very strong. It would take a long time to defeat him. It might even take a year and a half. By then it would be too late. The higher they went, the more terrifying the aura reverberating through the mountains became. It wasn't to the extent that it was difficult to walk, but taking a single step was incomparably difficult. Their foreheads were drenched in sweat. Ling Han and the Empress's speed was too slow, and was far from being able to compare with Yan Xianlu and the others. Going by this way, they might not even be able to drink any soup. What more meat? But what can we do? They were not 5th severance, and were forcibly one cultivation level lower than Yan Xianlu and the others. Furthermore, it was an incredibly crucial cultivation level. Severing mundane tier, yet possessed the battle prowess of a dividing soul tier. This was far too astonishing. At this rate, there's no way we'll be able to catch up to the other 3, Ling Han said to Queen. The Empress nodded. Unless we can break through to the 5th severance, the pressure here is strong enough. Maybe we can find an opportunity to break through. If that's the case, then this is actually the greatest opportunity for us. The two of them exchanged a glance and revealed a smile. That was right in front of the 5th severance. Was there still a greater opportunity? Ling Han was slightly more relaxed than the Empress, but for the sake of the Empress's future, he did not want to draw the Empress into the Black Tower. Instead, he used his full strength to resist the terrifying aura in the mountains and climbed up step by step. This was the Broken Clouds Mountain. It was so tall that it could block the clouds. Although the Three Suns Peak was not the tallest mountain, its height was still enough to make people shrink back. 1 day, 2 days, 10 days, a month. They actually walked on the mountain path for a whole month. Even though they didn't walk fast, after so many days, the bottom of the mountain had long disappeared. Only white clouds were left, and if they went up, they still wouldn't be able to reach the top. This mountain is way too high. Ling Han and the Empress did not know whether Yin Xianlu and the others had reached the summit or not. However, under the tempering of this aura, it was as if they were battling with a frightening opponent at all times. The barrier inside their bodies was becoming clearer and clearer. Fifth severance. They had already reached the hope of breaking through to the fifth severance. It was close at hand, as if they could touch it if they reached out. But if they really stretched out their hands to touch it, it was as if it was so far away that they could never touch it. This kind of feeling drove them crazy. Is it because our tempering is not enough, or should we refine the heavenly Tao Jade? The Empress asked. Ling Han didn't know either. Putting aside the fact that they didn't have the experience of breaking through to the fifth severance, even the people he came into contact with didn't have it, either. He couldn't ask others for their experience at all. Yin Xianlu Lao Songshan and Ji Tong, was this a joke? Putting aside the fact that they had already run far away, even if they were, could it be easy for Ling Han to ask? Even if he did, would they pay any attention? In sects of sixth heaven celestial king tier, and above, there would always be one or two people who broke through to the fifth severance every epoch. Then Yin Xianlu and the others would have someone to guide them, so that they wouldn't go down the wrong path. More importantly, neither Ling Han nor the Empress could be sure whether they could break through to the fifth severance in their present situation. Let's not refine the heavenly Tao Jade first, then. Ling Han thought for a moment, and thought that the fifth severance couldn't be broken through so easily. The Empress nodded. The two of them continued to walk. Not long after, they saw fog curl around them, forming some kind of shape. This was originally very normal. The position here was too high, and there were clouds everywhere. But now this fog actually took the shape of a human, and it was becoming clearer and clearer. Not only were the features and silhouettes clear, it was even well developed. In a mere breath's time, this human shape had completely taken shape. If it weren't for the fact that Ling Han and the Empress saw this kind of transformation with their own eyes, they definitely wouldn't have thought that this person was actually formed from fog. This was a man, very young, with a full head of black hair draped over his shoulders, giving off a wild feeling. His arrogance soared, his eyes astonishingly bright. Upon closer inspection, there was actually a cross-shaped symbol in the depths of his pupils. Sword demon race? The Empress suddenly said. What sword demon race? Ling Han asked. In my bloodline memories, there is information about this race, the Empress explained. This is a frightening race. They don't have many people, but those that come out are all incredibly stunning, and a great many celestial kings have emerged from them. A great many celestial kings? This race is all elites of the sword. With a strike of their sword, any existence would be sliced into 4 pieces. This is a kind of supreme regulation. As the two of them spoke, this young man had already walked towards Ling Han and the Empress, and said, Yi Wuxiang, you have been conferred as one of the 10 great prodigies of the Eastern Celestial Realm, ranked 8th. I, Gu Fei, have specially come to experience it. What was going on? Ling Han had the Empress, and the Empress had also Ling Han. Who was this Gu Fei speaking to? Yi Wuxiang, and the others weren't called Yi Wuxiang. Yi Wuxiang, you are ranked 8th among the 10 great prodigies. Be careful that this becomes a curse, and you can only stay at the 8th heaven celestial king tier for the rest of your life. Gu Fei continued. Come, you call yourself eternal prosperity, and this has violated my taboo. Ling Han and the Empress both felt their hearts tremble, and then came to a realization. Yi Wuxiang was the eternal prosperity celestial king. This was the place where the eternal prosperity celestial king achieved Tao. An epoch ago, the eternal prosperity celestial king comprehended Tao here, and broke through to the celestial king tier. He replayed all the opponents he had encountered along the way, and relived his life of battle. Because the celestial king achieved Tao, it caused a mysterious reaction from the heaven and earth, and this kind of memory was also engraved. An epoch later, the heaven and earth had another unusual phenomenon, and there was Gu Fei's rebirth, replaying the scene of the challenge that year. Gu Fei was obviously a character of an epoch. Perhaps he had already died long ago, or perhaps he had become a celestial king, and was immortal, but this Gu Fei now was the Gu Fei in Yi Wuxiang's memories. Come and fight. Gu Fei declared loudly. When he roared out these words, another cloud gathered, and once again turned into a human figure. But it wasn't Gu Fei, but rather another handsome man. Yiwushang, I Zhang Yin challenge you. Chapter 1918. Ling Han turned to the Empress, and smilingly said, "One each." "All right." The Empress nodded. Ling Han faced Gu Fei, while the Empress faced Zhang Yin. The two manifestations immediately launched their attacks. Boom! Celestial techniques swept out, incredibly frightening. These two manifestations were not very strong, and were only ordinary Emperor tier. Ling Han and the Empress should be able to easily suppress them, but the environment here was special, and Ling Han and the Empress still had to endure a frightening pressure, while the two manifestations were formed from the heaven and earth here in the first place, so they were naturally not affected. In this way, they were slightly strained. After battling for a very long time, they finally defeated these two, and the manifestations immediately turned back into clouds and mist, dissipating among the mountains. Those that could be remembered by the eternal prosperity celestial king do have some strength, Ling Han said. The Empress nodded. Furthermore, going by the usual pattern, the closer they were to the end, the stronger the opponents they would encounter. At the start, there were already two Emperor tiers, and added with the violent pressure of this place, how were they going to proceed from now on? Since this was the place where the eternal prosperity celestial king achieved Tao, then among the opponents he encountered on his way here, there would definitely be dividing soul tier, immortal palace tier, and ascending origin tier elites. Once one of such beings appeared, then Ling Han and the Empress would definitely have no choice but to retreat in defeat. Going by that logic, even the fifth severance could only look on and lament. So how could they possibly ascend to the top? That kind of thing definitely won't happen. Otherwise, the eternal prosperity celestial king would not have sent Yin Xianlu over, Ling Han immediately said. We'll naturally know when we go up. The Empress's confidence was not affected. However, the eternal prosperity celestial king seems to have really been cursed. After an epoch he is still an eighth heaven celestial king. It should be just a coincidence. The two of them continued forward, but they had not gone far when the clouds and mist swirled, and another change occurred. Yiwushang, I Sangdong, have come to challenge you. I Dong Ziqi, have come to seek guidance. The clouds and mist transformed into two valiant men, exuding a light that soared into the skies. The battle immediately began. Ling Han and the Empress still chose an opponent each, and this time, they spent a longer time to defeat these two. They exchanged a look and nodded. Sure enough, the opponents were getting stronger and stronger. This made sense as well. If an opponent of the same level was defeated by the eternal prosperity celestial king, how could he possibly be remembered? Therefore, the opponents here would be stronger than the last. This was very normal. There were definitely the most severing mundane tiers in this world. Thus, the chances of encountering outstanding elites among them would be very low. However, after advancing to the dividing soul tier, the entire social circle would suddenly become much smaller, and the situation would be different. Then, when it came to the immortal palace tier and ascending origin tier, the number of prodigies decreased drastically. Each prodigy was more outstanding than the last. The two of them set off, and not long after, two more opponents appeared in front of them. There was only one word left. Fight. Ling Han and the Empress practically didn't stop to rest at all. They continued to battle just like that, and they both felt that some kind of change was happening to them. It was as if something inside their bodies had been upgraded. 2 months, 3 months, 5 months, time quietly passed, and the aura here did not change much. For example, it had suddenly become incredibly frightening, and the severing mundane tier did not even have the right to take a single step here. And such a long period of time had greatly exceeded the expectations of Ling Han and the Empress, and should have exceeded everyone's expectations as well. Half a year had passed, and they actually still hadn't climbed to the peak of a mountain. This was not because the Three Yang peak was too tall, but rather because it had not been peaceful along the way at all. There were continuous battles. The only benefit was that no matter what opponent appeared, They were only severing mundane tears. This should have been deliberately arranged. Logically speaking, the eternal prosperity celestial king could not possibly always battle with severing mundane tears. And we are severing mundane tears, so our opponents are also severing mundane tears. Furthermore, they are within the range of the fourth severance, but each is stronger than the last. If this continues, it is really possible that a fifth severance opponent will appear. I'm rather looking forward to it. The two of them had already forgotten about the so-called fated opportunity at the summit. If they could break through to the fifth severance, this would be the most crucial threshold in their lives, signifying that they had advanced into the ranks of monarch tiers. Otherwise, they would be a great distance away from top-grade prodigies. Then come battle. Elsewhere. Peng. Yan Xianlu defeated his opponent with a single punch, and once again materialized into the form of clouds and mist. His expression was calm, filled with confidence. That was a kind of innate calmness and confidence. He was clearer about the situation here than others, and he firmly believed that he would definitely be the first person to reach the summit. He said he was not afraid of competition, and this was indeed one of the reasons. He was confident that he was invincible among his peers, but for the greatest fated opportunity in this epoch to appear on Three-Yang Peak, there had to be a great many top-grade prodigies competing together, and recreate the path of achieving Tao that the eternal prosperity celestial king had, defeating all the prodigies of the world, and stepping on the heads of prodigies to ascend to the summit. Only then would the heaven and earth resonate with them, and they would obtain a massive fated opportunity. It would not increase their cultivation level, but rather carry out a fundamental change. For example, he had a celestial Tao physique, and was naturally close to Tao. He could learn any celestial technique at first glance, but as long as it was not the true great Tao, then there would be room for improvement. He wanted to make use of this great fated opportunity to improve his physique closer to great Tao. Only in this way would he be qualified to battle with those few heaven-defying freaks. If someone knew Yan Xianlu's thoughts at this moment, they would definitely be greatly shocked. To be able to be called a heaven-defying freak by Yan Xianlu, what kind of earth-shattering figure was that? On the other side, though Lao Song and Shan Jitong had also swept through all obstacles along the way, they did not know the specific situation of this place, and did not know whether the other two monarch tiers had reached the summit before them, so they could not help but feel slightly anxious. The one they were most worried about was naturally Yan Xianlu. This person was called the King of the Celestial Path, and this was a supreme praise. Competing with this kind of person, one would naturally be slightly weaker. At the foot of the mountain, ha 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 ha, amidst loud laughter, a young girl leaped down from a dragonhawk, placed her hands by her mouth and called out loudly, "Ling Han, Niu is here." Young Imperial Empress, don't be so loud. There was another person behind her who hurriedly tried to stop her. This was naturally Hu Niu. She placed her hands on her hips and grumbled, so annoying, so annoying. All day long, this won't do, that won't do. Then Niu won't be some damn Imperial Empress anymore. Come, I'll give it to you. She couldn't help but grimace. This young Imperial Empress was really worrisome. Why was there no one who could restrain her? Young Imperial Empress, Ling Han has been affected by the shockwaves of the great battle of ascending origin tiers, and has been swept into the shockwaves. He definitely cannot escape, she advised. This Ling Han should only have the same name. We had better hurry back to the Rock Palace to avoid any complications. No, no. Hu Niu shook her head like a rattle drum. If you want to go back, then go back yourself. Niu doesn't want it. Furthermore, you short-sighted guys have absolutely no idea how powerful Niu's Ling Han is. He won't die. Young Imperial Empress. Wang. An indescribable aura rippled out, and a series of ripples appeared in the air. There was actually a seven-colored brilliance in the skies, as if it was dancing in joy. Immediately, she showed a cautious expression and said to the skies, "Since the eternal prosperity king has come, why not show yourself?" Chapter 1920. Zhang Ye's mind had to be filled with 10,000 curses. Who had he offended? Peng peng peng. Those memory manifestations all stepped on his body as they chased over. Every step they took caused him to cry out repeatedly. Thankfully, the target of these manifestations was the young girl in front of him. Otherwise, if every one of them gave him a punch in passing, he would directly be done for. Ah! Zhangye trembled incessantly. Some manifestations really did not have the right place to step, and they purposely greeted his buttocks. Their kicks caused him unspeakable pain, and even Chrysanthemum Lord was greatly punished. So you are a human? The young girl in front turned around, her expression filled with shock. Then she became annoyed. I already told you to get out of the way, and you are still standing here. If you delay Nyo's time, can you afford to pay for it? Next time, don't let Nyo touch you again, or I will blow your head off. Saying so, the young girl swaggered off. Of course, she also brought with her even more memory manifestations, forming a vast army. Zhangya. Fuck you. Yang Hongyi was the holy son of a 6-star great sect. He had already advanced into the 4th severance 1 million years ago, and had long since cultivated to the peak stage of the 4th severance. In truth, he could already break through to the dividing soul tier, but he had never taken this step all along. That was because he had an even greater ambition, and that was to become a 5th severance. However, this was too difficult to achieve. In so many years, he had not broken through the slightest bit at all, and had always remained where he was. He was also a person with great willpower, and had not wavered in his determination. In any case, the lifespan of Celestials was unlimited, and as long as the Immortals' tribulation had not reached an insurmountable level, there was completely no need for him to be in a hurry to break through. The difference between the 4th severance and the 5th severance was really too great. If he could not advance into this cultivation level, he could only be an emperor tier, and had no fate with being a top-notch prodigy. It could be said that if you encountered any small flaws in your cultivation, such as not being able to solidify your cultivation level, this was not important. After reaching the Celestial King tier, there would be plenty of time for you to replenish them. But there was only this one chance to become a 5th severance. He believed that this was a chance bestowed upon him by the heavens. He definitely had to become the first person to reach the top, and obtain a massive opportunity, taking the chance to push open the door to the 5th severance. Pung. Under this kind of pressure and motivation, he completed his self-improvement, and his battle prowess increased by an unbelievable amount. He defeated another memory manifestation. I've improved even further. With my present battle prowess, I should be invincible in the severing mundane tier. He said proudly to himself. The enemies here are all adjusted according to my realm, so I don't have the slightest disadvantage. Yen Xianlu Laosong, Shan Jidong, just you wait. In the future, I will definitely be one of the all-powerful people who can shake the celestial realm with just a raise of their feet. Bang bang bang, the ground suddenly trembled. At first it was very light, but it soon became as if the earth was shaking and the mountains were shaking. What was going on? Although he had just said that he could shake the heavens and earth with just a lift of his foot, the problem was, firstly, he had not become such an important figure, and secondly, he had not lifted his foot. Get out of the way! Get out of the way! A feminine voice rang out as a beautiful figure charged over from below. So beautiful, Yang Hongyi immediately revealed a look of amazement. But in the blink of an eye, this amazement turned into panic and even fear. My God! What's the matter with the crowd of figures following the maiden? That's the memory manifestation of a celestial king. Have you gone mad? You actually did not fight your way up step by step, but instead provoked so many in one go. Do you want to die? Hiss, even if you want to die, you can't drag others down with you. Fuck. He had not even finished this thought when he saw that the maiden was already about to charge in front of him, scaring him so much that he hurriedly moved to the side. Pung pung pung. After the maiden charged over, a large crowd of manifestations also charged over. However, this place just so happened to be a narrow mountain path, and could only allow 3 people to walk side by side at most. Though he had let the maiden pass, the large crowd of manifestations did not care about anything else, and charged over together. Yang Hongyi was immediately in trouble. He was attacked by a few dozen manifestations, and was sent flying like marbles. Unfortunately, he could not retaliate. These manifestations were all too powerful. He could still match them one-on-one, but if it was 1 against 2 or 1 against 3, he would only be able to take a beating. If dozens of them attacked him together, he would definitely die. Thus, he definitely could not become the target of these manifestations. Otherwise, that would be seeking death. Hong Long Long, the maiden led over 100 manifestations and crushed over, kicking up a cloud of dust on the ground. Only then did Yang Hongyi crawl up from the ground and look at the place where the maiden had disappeared. His face was covered in bruises, all caused by the collisions of the manifestations. Furthermore, if he did not erase the strange martial art intent in his body, these injuries could not be healed at all. That was definitely not something that could be healed in a short period of time. He would maintain this pig-headed appearance for a very, very long time. I go. He raised his middle finger at the back of the maiden. If she returned in front of him, he would definitely come to blows with her. He couldn't swallow this insult. Ioyo. This raised finger immediately affected the injuries on his body, causing him to groan involuntarily. Pain, it was really painful. Huang Fu Ling, Wu Siyuan, Xiao Junren, one prodigy after another was surpassed by Hunyou, and they were all shocked and furious. As Hunyou ascended higher and higher, the army of manifestations behind her also became larger and larger. This number was no longer counted in the hundreds, but in the tens of thousands. It was too terrifying. Every manifestation was a prodigy of an era, and with so many of them added together, just how astonishing was the lineup. If Yin Xianlu saw this, he would probably pale with fright, right? Yet Hunyou was completely unconcerned, and excitedly called out Ling Han's name, driving a train all the way, pulling in enough hatred. The 10th month, Ling Han and the Empress had both fought until they were driven mad. Before this, though they had encountered a great many enemies, there were not many that could truly become their match. Yet here, every opponent was a super prodigy, a formidable foe that the eternal prosperity celestial king had encountered on his path to success. The success of a general was built on the bones of tens of thousands, and for a celestial king to ascend to the pinnacle, it was naturally unavoidable that he would need innumerable prodigies as his stepping stones. Now, these stepping stones had been reproduced by the Tao of heaven and earth, and every single one of them had frightening battle prowess. This practically listed all the formidable foes that the eternal prosperity celestial king had encountered in his lifetime. How many years of accumulation had that been? How many years had Ling Han and the Empress lived? Could they be compared? For them, advancing their cultivation level too quickly, and accumulation was a very great weakness. But now, they had really fought enough. Ling Han felt his blood boiling. His Tao heart was rising, and his will was ethereal. There was a great door that was about to open, but in terms of truly pushing it open, he was still that little bit off. The heavenly Tao Jade could assist in. I'm about to break through, the Empress said. She too had the same feeling as Ling Han. Enter the Black Tower and refine the heavenly Tao Jade. This kind of opportunity definitely cannot be missed. Otherwise, who knows when the next opportunity would come. Ling Han made a prompt decision and entered into the Black Tower with the Empress. Only a while later, they saw Hunyou leading a great army as she bolted over. Ling Han, Ling Han! She charged forwards excitedly. Chapter 1921. Ling Han was startled. Hunyou, why is she here? Ling Han immediately came to a realization. It had to be Commander Guan who had reported the situation at the time to Hunyou, saying that he was already dead. But how could Hunyou be willing to believe it? Thus she personally came over. What is it? The Empress could not sense the situation outside the Black Tower. Ling Han broke into a smile and said, Hunyou is here, and we will meet soon. A rare expression of seriousness appeared on the Empress' face. One of her doppelgangers had seen Hunyou before, so she knew how easily this little girl could get jealous. She also knew that Hunyou was similarly as beautiful as a celestial maiden, and was not inferior to her in any way. Wanting to subdue Hunyou and continue to sit firmly on the throne of the main wife of the Ling family was a challenge. However, the Empress was full of confidence. Ling Han took out the heavenly Tao Jade and smashed out a gap. The two of them pressed their palms together, extracting the essence within. Hong! Their whole bodies suddenly trembled, and an astonishing multicolored light shot out from their bodies, forming one seal after another. Each seal was different. 2 hours, 4 hours, 10 hours. One day Ling Han and the Empress had both reached a state of saturation, and could no longer accept the power of the heavenly Tao Jade. And they were also filled with confidence that they could deliver the fifth strike. However, the essence of the heavenly Tao Jade was still endlessly gushing out from the gap, as if it would never stop. It could not be sealed. Ling Han frowned. Wouldn't the heavenly Tao Jade be wasted like this? At first his plan was very good. Hunyeo had come, and he could give the remaining heavenly Tao Jade to her. But now he had to break through to the fifth severance. Otherwise, the essence of the heavenly Tao Jade would quickly fade away, and he would miss the opportunity formed from these 10 months of bitter battles. This was the accumulation of innumerable battles. The next time he wanted to reach this kind of state, he might have to fight 10 times, or 100 times more enemies. The problem was, this was a chance that only appeared once in an epoch. Under normal circumstances, how long would you need to encounter so many supreme prodigies? Thus, if he missed this chance, the next chance might be 1,000,000 years, or 10 million years later. Ling Han pondered for a moment, exited the Black Tower, and then entered into the spatial god tool. Take it. He tossed out the remaining heavenly Tao Jade, and then turned to leave, leaving behind bewitching Maiden Ro, who was baffled. His heart ached. He naturally wanted to leave such a good thing for his own people. But Hunyeo was in a hurry, and had long since disappeared without a trace. The heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had not advanced into the severing mundane tier, either, so she was completely unqualified to refine it. Otherwise, she would only be seeking death. He could only let this demoness take advantage of him. Bewitching Maiden Ro received the heavenly Tao Jade, her expression completely dumbfounded. What do you mean by that? You threw a rock at me and then ran. What did I do to you? Why did you hit me? However, in the next moment, she sensed the energy released by the heavenly Tao Jade, and she immediately revealed an astonished expression. It was too majestic, as if the heavenly Tao was right in front of them, within reach. She hurriedly grabbed the heavenly Tao Jade tightly, sat down cross-legged, and began to refine the benefits. The moment she took the initiative to guide the essence in the heavenly Tao Jade, she immediately discovered what kind of precious treasure this was. The inadequacies in her previous cultivation had been repaired one by one, and reached a perfect state. Her 4 severance had all been aimed at her own body, but now, the mortal bonds that had been severed had all returned and replaced them. There was now a clear chasm between her and the heavenly Tao. Was this a bad thing? No. She immediately discovered that it was not so, though there was a distance between her and the heavenly Tao. On the contrary, she instead understood the heavenly Tao even more clearly. That was because it was not real when one was within it. Just like when one was in a chess game, one would instead be muddled. But now that she had jumped out of the chess game, she could look at it from a more macroscopic perspective, so it was naturally different. She was currently advancing from a king tier to an emperor tier, and she was a divine fetus in the first place. After becoming an emperor tier, her future would be infinitely bright. Didn't Ling Han hate her? Why did he give her such a precious treasure? Could it be that this was a token of love? This enemy still knew how to be embarrassed, and wanted to abduct her without even saying a single word to her. Humph, no way. She definitely had to be as reserved as she could be. Otherwise, Ling Han would still think that she was a casual woman. She was not casual in the slightest. It was just that she had cultivated charm techniques, and was naturally smiling. Ling Han did not know that bewitching Maiden Ro had misunderstood. His heart was still aching. He had actually thrown such a precious treasure to an outsider, and he wanted some peace and quiet. But when he returned to the Black Tower, he immediately comprehended under the reincarnation tree. He and the Empress had definitely absorbed even more of the essence of the heavenly Tao Jade, erasing any small flaws that had appeared on their way up, and reaching a level of perfection, and the majority of the energy was pushing the circulation of the heavenly Tao, allowing them to witness the profound mysteries of the fifth severance. That door that had initially been tightly sealed was already showing signs of loosening. Next, it would be up to them. How could they push open this door, and from there enter? After all, the heavenly Tao Jade only increased the possibility of reaching the fifth severance by a sliver. Under the reincarnation tree, time flew. Both Ling Han and the Empress were exuding flashes of light that intertwined to form a massive ball of light. Great Tao flowed on the surface, and it was as if it was still breathing, retracting and releasing. Every time it was retracted and released, there would be a terrifying aura circulating. If it were not for the fact that they were inside the Black Tower, it was guaranteed that the whole Three-Yang Peak would be able to sense it. 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. A whole 1,000 years passed, and Ling Han and the Empress opened their eyes at practically the same time. Pa! The orbs of light around them also suddenly shattered, only to see that there was no white in their eyes. Instead, there was an indescribably deep galaxy in their eyes. Their bodies exuded an aura that far surpassed that of the fourth severance, but in essence, belonged to the severing mundane tier. Incredibly mysterious. Fifth severance. No, they had not yet delivered this strike. It was only that they were still a sliver away from this step. They needed to first pass the heavenly tribulation, and then they could deliver this strike towards the heaven and earth, and step into the ranks of monarch tiers. Let's go. The two of them exited the Black Tower at the same time, and then each drew out an azure peach leaf, placing it above their heads. Boom! The heaven and earth roared furiously, and two dark clouds immediately rolled over. You could deliver the first severance, the second severance, the third severance, and the fourth severance, and each strike would strike the heaven and earth. But after the fourth severance, at least the roots would still be broken and the threads connected. Thus, though the heaven and earth were furious, their fury was limited, and this was reflected in the might of the heavenly tribulation. But the fifth severance, when this strike descended, that would completely sever their connection with the heaven and earth, as if they had jumped out of the restraints of the heaven and earth. This definitely could not be allowed. The heaven and earth would not allow it. Thus, the heavenly tribulation surged, wanting to use its strongest fury to erase this kind of abnormality. However, the natural peach seal played its role. This kind of source power of heaven and earth could not help cultivators comprehend Tao and increase their cultivation level. It seemed to be of no help at all, but it could conceal the secrets of heaven and make the might of the heavenly tribulation weaker. At this kind of moment, there was nothing more useful than the natural peach seal. The two peach seals immediately released a light that soared into the skies. A strange power surged over, and it was as if the Three-Yang Peak had been cut off from the world and had become an independent heaven and earth. The scale of the thunderclouds immediately shrunk. Though it still far surpassed the level of the fourth severance, it was at most comparable to the Yang Soul tribulation. Wasn't the fifth severance equivalent to the Yang Soul? Then wouldn't this kind of heavenly tribulation be a small matter? Chapter 1922. The Eternal Prosperity Celestial King looked towards the sky and revealed a look of slight surprise. Not to mention that his divine sense was boundless. Even if he casually glanced at it now, he could immediately discover what was going on. Fifth severance, natural peach seal. These two were always connected. He had never heard of anyone that could survive the heavenly tribulation of the fifth severance without relying on the natural peach seal. There was definitely no such person. Even those few old monsters had not been so ferocious in the past. Their heirs did not have any other treasures that they could rely on to withstand this kind of great tribulation either. He could only rely on the natural peach talisman. Which brat is this from? He actually has such a treasure. He was a little curious. The natural peach tree was the source of heaven and earth, but it had been cut down by an unparalleled existence many years ago. The natural peach talismans that everyone used now were all passed down a long time ago, and there were no new ones left. This was something that could only be used once. For it to be able to arrive at this moment, it made the Eternal Prosperity Celestial King slightly interested. Moreover, what about the fifth severance? Even among the disciples of Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings, there weren't many that could reach this kind of height. Every great sect would only produce one or two in a single epoch. But now, there were actually two people breaking through at the same time. Even he, an eighth heaven celestial king, could not conceal his astonishment. Lu Herong also revealed an expression of surprise. Though her abilities were inferior to the eternal prosperity celestial kings, the Rock Palace was a ninth heaven celestial king tier force, and she actually knew more than the eternal prosperity celestial king. The Kuanping Palace did not have many connate peach talismans left. Interesting. Truly interesting. The eternal prosperity celestial king's eyes shone brightly, and the look of astonishment on his face deepened. He had not paid any attention to Ling Han before. It was only when he was attracted by the heavenly tribulation that he took a second look. Then he discovered the natural peach talisman. Following that, he discovered even more things. If the immortal king wanted to know, there was no way to hide it. Heaven and earth ancestral flame source water. The eternal prosperity celestial king murmured. Even a celestial king would find it extremely difficult to obtain one of these two source powers. Yet he has obtained two of them. Could it be that he is? Lu Hairong's beautiful eyes also shone. With the eternal prosperity celestial king's reminder, how could she not come out? It's amazing. She instantly felt a strong urge to capture Ling Han, seize the two source powers of heaven and earth, and hand them over to Hunyo to refine. As soon as this thought appeared, it became uncontrollable. This kid is called Ling Han, the eternal prosperity celestial king said with a laugh. Olv Herong opened her mouth and didn't know what to say. Was this Ling Han the Ling Han Hunyo was looking for? This is too much of a coincidence. Hunyo firmly believed that Ling Han had not died. If this young man was that Ling Han, then being able to dodge the shockwaves of an ascending origin tears attack was understandable. He even had two source energies of the heavens and earth. Could it be that he didn't have other defensive treasures? Unfortunately, in that case, he would not be able to transfer the two source powers of heaven and earth to Hunyo. A figure flew over. It was a white-haired old man with sparse hair, a stooped figure, and a face full of wrinkles. He looked like he was about to die of old age, and his entire body emitted a strong aura of decay. Old demon blood shadow brat. Did you think that I wouldn't be able to catch up to you just because you ran out quietly? How naive. He sneered. But he didn't notice the presence of the two celestial kings. As long as the immortal king didn't want others to know, it didn't matter who he was standing in front of. In terms of grasp of great Tao, celestial kings surpassed the ascending origin tier by more than just a little bit. Brat, do you think I won't be able to find you? Old demon blood shadow murmured to himself. Previously, he had been waiting outside Alchemy City all along, and then discovered that Ling Han had become the new holy son of Alchemy City. To be honest, when he first heard this news, the expression on his face was incredibly interesting. He had told this brat to become Lu Xianming's follower and assist the latter to ascend the position. Then, he would take the chance to steal the natural peach seal. But this guy actually became the holy son himself. This old demon blood shadow was very dumbfounded. This brat actually knew alchemy, and it seemed like his attainments were not low either. Otherwise, how could he possibly have been chosen as the holy son of Alchemy City? He immediately recalled that he had previously discovered that there was something strange on Ling Han's body, and it was very likely that he was hiding some kind of treasure. But at that time, he had only considered the natural peach seal. Otherwise, if he could not break through to the next cultivation level, it would be useless no matter how many treasures he had. In any case, he would smack Ling Han to death in future, and whatever treasure he had would be his. But now, a wave of regret rose up in him. He had a feeling that he seemed to have made a mistake. After that, when Ling Han ascended the position and became the future chairperson of Alchemy City, old demon blood shadow was directly dumbfounded. That was fine too. Told you to be someone else's assistant and help him ascend the position, yet you took it yourself. Bull. This kind of change in plan, even if someone else had thought of it, how could they possibly do it? After old demon blood shadow's shock, what remained was naturally wild joy. Now, his natural peach seal would be secured, and the treasures on Ling Han would also be his. But he waited and waited, and still did not see Ling Han come out to see him, which made the old bastard more and more anxious. In the end, he could not help but sneak into the city, and was even discovered. A great battle ensued, and he fled wounded. But he still managed to capture a few people, and directly extracted their souls. He discovered that Ling Han had already left Alchemy City, and had gone to meet Yin Xianlu. Thus he too immediately hurried over. Though the Eternal Prosperity Celestial King was famous, he felt that as long as he did not provoke this Celestial King, and merely abducted a minor cultivator or minor alchemist, there was definitely no way that it could possibly alert the Eternal Prosperity Celestial King. Could it be that this Celestial King was acquainted with Ling Han? What a joke! He could not ascend Three-Yang Peak. This was the place where a Celestial King attained Tao. Now the Eternal Prosperity Celestial King only allowed juniors in the Severing Mundane tier to go and fight for this kind of great fortune. It was completely impossible for others to break through his means, unless their strength was still above his. But if their strength was still above his, what use would they have for this kind of great fortune? Lightning flashed, and a large man also quietly appeared. Ba Yao he returned to the Thundercloud Palace, and repeated the matter regarding Ling Han. Then he found an excuse and ran out alone. Of course it was for Ling Han, born of a Celestial King tier level force. His judgment was much more brilliant than old demon blood shadows. He could be sure that the treasure on Ling Han was priceless, and it was very likely to be a source power of heaven and earth, or a precious treasure of a Celestial King. Thus he had come alone, wanting to seize this kind of treasure. Perhaps the opportunity for him to become a Celestial King was on Ling Han, the place where a Celestial King attained Tao. He looked up at Three-Yang Peak, revealing an expression of awe. The Eternal Prosperity Celestial King was high and lofty, invulnerable to all tribulations. Compared to him, the Thundercloud Celestial King was as insignificant as an ant, not even worthy of carrying his shoes. He only dared to imagine that he could reach such heights in his dreams. It was normal. He only hoped that he could break through to become a Celestial King. When he was still a holy son, he was filled with confidence, thinking that he would definitely succeed. But as his cultivation level increased, he gradually discovered that this kind of difficulty was as high as ascending to the heavens. Becoming a Celestial King was too difficult. How many holy sons and holy daughters had appeared in the Thundercloud Palace in these trillions of years? But how many had become Celestial Kings? 0. There was no lack of prodigies that were more outstanding than him. But everyone had failed, so why could he succeed? Whether I can become a Celestial King or not, it all depends on this one time. Chapter 1924. Ling Han had not expected at all that the great change, that small tower spoke of would actually be so great. The 3 levels of the tower opened simultaneously. Wang, the Tower of 3 Realms, floated in his dantian. The 9 levels of the tower shone together, circulating with a supreme aura that could suppress the heavens and connect the ages. N. The Eternal Prosperity Celestial King frowned slightly. Just then, he actually sensed a supreme aura that far surpassed his level. A 9th Heaven Celestial King perhaps. It was even stronger. How was this possible? His expression was filled with shock, and he only felt that it was inconceivable. It was as if all sorts of bizarre things had happened at the same time. Meanwhile, Lu Hairong's limbs trembled lightly. She had come into contact with this kind of aura before. Was it that lord? At the waist of the mountain, Ling Han did not have time to react to the changes in the Black Tower. He raised his fist skywards, and faced the heavenly tribulation that had become even more violent. In truth, he could have delivered this strike a little later. Then, even if the heaven and earth were enraged, another bolt of heavenly tribulation would descend at most, and he could even directly survive it. But Ling Han wanted to try and see just how terrifying this kind of heavenly tribulation was. He wanted to step onto the pinnacle of martial art, and had to surpass all prodigies. Thus, he also had to defeat some opponents that even prodigies could not possibly defeat. Furthermore, there was still the natural peach seal to suppress it. If he still could not survive this kind of heavenly tribulation, he would really be too useless. Peng He resisted the heavenly tribulation, and it was only a single exchange, and he felt his arm go slightly numb. This caused him to be slightly shocked. It should be known how powerful his physique was, and even Soul elites would find it very difficult to wound him. But now, he actually felt numb with a single strike. However, it felt great. A terrifying power surged through Ling Han's body. This was a mysterious change that had happened to his dantian after he had sliced open the heaven and earth. It no longer absorbed spiritual qi from the heaven and earth and converted it into origin power, but rather turned into a galaxy of its own. Previously he had formed 10,000 stars, but that was only a symbol and could only store origin power. But it was different now. These stars had turned into real stars, and there was endless power that was nourishing him. No wonder the fifth severance was so strong, being able to match Soul elites. This was a completely new cultivation level. He can break through the dome of heaven. Ling Han let out a long howl as he fought fiercely against the lightning. Punch after punch exploded, and the source power formed by the 9 heavens flame and the Xianin source water coiled around his fists, forming symbols of the great path. They also grew stronger in this process. The source energy of the heaven and earth was destined to reach the celestial king realm, but whether it could reach the 1st, 2nd, 8th, or 9th heaven was uncertain. Therefore Ling Han had to constantly temper them. On the other side, the Empress's heavenly tribulation was also nearing its end. She did what she could, and did not deliver the 5th strike too early. Instead, she waited until the last bolt of heavenly tribulation descended before delivering the 5th strike. In this way, even though the heavens and earth were enraged, they could do nothing to her. Since the two of them were undergoing heavenly tribulation at the same time, the Empress's heavenly tribulation was over, and Ling Han's was naturally over as well. The two masses of thunderclouds dissipated at practically the same time. Ling Han and the Empress exchanged a look, and both of them broke into a satisfied smile. Clouds and mists swirled, and immediately, a new memory manifestation of a celestial king appeared. But this time, it was at the level of Soul. True enough, the heaven and earth resonated, and would adjust according to the difference in cultivation level of each person. Thus, a higher cultivation level did not have any advantage, but rather battle strength at the same cultivation level determined the speed of advancement. Come! Ling Han laughed loudly, and was just about to try out the Black Tower's new ability. He could finally use the Black Tower to a limited extent, and this made him very curious exactly what level he could reach. The Tower of 3 Realms was at least a 9th heaven celestial king tier level precious tool. If it was fully unleashed, it could rival a celestial king now. So what if he could use it to a limited extent? Ling Han exchanged blows with the manifestation. He only parried, and did not retaliate, lest he accidentally kill the other. Then, he communicated with the Black Tower, and found out how to use the mystical powers of time, space, and slaughter. With his comprehension ability, and added with the fact that the Black Tower was in his body in the first place, he very soon showed an expression of understanding, and pressed his palm towards a manifestation. Collect! That manifestation's whole body instantly lit up, and multiple patterns of great Tao appeared. But there was no change. I can't collect it. Ling Han was surprised. He had wanted to directly collect this manifestation into the Black Tower, but had failed. Then let's change. He smiled and pressed out another palm. Cut! Shwa shwa shwa. Innumerable wind blades sliced out, slashing towards that manifestation. Each wind blade was only a foot long, yet there were patterns of great Tao pulsating on them, drawing on the power of heaven and earth, strengthening them to a terrifying extent. The wind blades swept past, and that manifestation was immediately sliced into pieces. And it was done just like that. Chapter 1925. Powerful Ling Han himself could deal with this manifestation, but it definitely would not be so easy. The Tower of 3 Realms was truly a precious treasure. This was only a limited use, and it was still limited by his cultivation level. Yet its might was already so terrifying, so how powerful would it be in future? But why couldn't he collect it previously? Ling Han thought for a moment, and realization dawned on him. After drawing it into the Black Tower, it would really be within his complete control. Then, the might that the Black Tower could unleash had to be a few times stronger than the opponent's, and only then could it be drawn in. The Black Tower was naturally stronger than that manifestation, but the might that it could unleash now could not reach a few times stronger. The Empress spent some effort to kill that manifestation. Firstly, her battle prowess was inferior to Ling Han's, and secondly, she did not use the power of her divine fetus, and thirdly, she did not have the Black Tower either. Thus her speed was slightly slower. Next, her opponent appeared again. Time flows. Ling Han used the regulations of time and pressed out a palm strike. That manifestation directly dissipated. It was not shattered by a terrifying power, but rather the endless acceleration of time that was manifested in his palm strike, directly catalyzing it to the point where it died of old age and dissipated. Of course, if the opponent had been a normal person, then the effect would definitely not be so good, because Celestials had unlimited lifespans. So what if the flow of time accelerated their aging? It was only their attacks that were affected, but these manifestations were different. They were formed from the power of heaven and earth, and definitely could not exist for too long a period of time. Thus, under the acceleration of time, they rapidly disintegrated. Next, Ling Han tried out the regulations of slaughter. His sword streaked past, and murderous aura soared into the skies, instantly tearing this manifestation into pieces. The power of 3 regulations was astonishingly powerful. After testing it out, Ling Han had a good idea, and did not waste any more time. When the manifestation appeared, he directly moved, sweeping through everything in his path. His speed was much faster than before. Previously, he and the Empress were only Emperor tiers, and though the strength of the manifestations was much weaker, the crushing power of a monarch tier, over those of the same cultivation level, was completely different from that of an Emperor tier. Ling Han was the main attacker, and the Empress practically did not need to move. Their speed suddenly soared, and they headed towards the top of the mountain. In the blink of an eye, another few days had passed. Yin Xianlu was filled with lofty ambitions. The peak of the mountain was already close at hand, and he could be sure that this great fortune of heaven and earth had not been taken away by anyone yet. As expected, he was destined to become a king. A peerless prodigy, he strode forward, and the clouds scattered. There was a large stone in front of him that was about 3 meters in diameter. Its surface was flat, and there were runes flashing on it, as if they were alive. This was the boulder that the eternal prosperity celestial king had sat on when he was comprehending the Tao. After an epoch had passed, not only had the traces of the great Tao not faded, but instead, under the blessing of the heaven and earth, it had undergone a special transformation. Not every celestial king would be able to trigger the resonance of the heavens and earth when they achieved the Tao, and leave behind such a precious treasure. Only super mighty people at the level of the eternal prosperity celestial king could do it. What he needed to do now was to sit on the boulder. When a celestial king achieved the Tao, the heaven and earth would shine. This boulder had left behind a tiny bit of celestial king source power, but after an epoch of evolution, this source power had become a supreme rare treasure that could improve a cultivator in all aspects. In fact, this was about the same as the celestial king flame that the heavenly fire celestial king had transformed into Tao. However, the heavenly fire celestial king was more decisive, and had even refined himself, unlike the eternal prosperity celestial king, who had only left behind a tiny bit of benefit. Thus, this was far from being able to compare with the core of the heavenly fire celestial king, but with the blessing of the heaven and earth for an epoch, it was still a precious treasure among precious treasures. Nearer. Even Yin Xianlu showed an expression of excitement. As long as he sat on that boulder, the accumulation of the heaven and earth for an epoch would surge into his body, giving him endless fortune. It was very possible that he would be able to catch up to those world-defying freaks. His footsteps involuntarily quickened slightly. That was because of the excitement in his heart. It was as if the boulder had a life of its own, because there were a sufficient number of prodigies here, and the battles were also sufficiently intense. That was why it had caused the heaven and earth to resonate with the celestial king achieving Tao Stone, forming some kind of special transformation. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. His footsteps became more and more hurried, and he was already very close to that celestial boulder. All of a sudden, a strong sense of danger welled up in his heart. He suddenly raised his hand, and a white seal of light surged out from his palm. Then it enlarged, and an earthy yellow-black tortoise appeared. Pung attack shot over, blasting onto the seal of light. Suddenly, even the void trembled, as if the space was about to be torn apart. Shan Jitong, Yin Xianlu said calmly, not even turning his head. Are you regretting your decision? You should not have invited me here. Shan Jitong walked over from afar, his expression calm, as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. Yin Xianlu smiled calmly, but he was not looking at Shan Jitong. Instead, he was staring at another corner, and said, Brother Lao, why are you still not coming out? How long do you plan to hide for? Shan Jitong's expression immediately changed, because he had not discovered that Lao Song was still standing guard in secret. If he had battled fiercely with Yin Xianlu just now, then it was very possible that the latter would take advantage of the opportunity to snatch away his great fortune. The problem was this. He had not discovered Lao Song, but Yin Xianlu had. At least in terms of perception, the gap between the two of them was really a little big. Of course, it was also possible that Yin Xianlu was deliberately acting mysterious, wanting to disturb his Dao heart. Brother Yin indeed has sharp eyes and ears. My snake breath celestial technique is confident that it can deceive even dividing soul tier. Yet Brother Yin has seen through it with a single glance. Amidst a light chuckle, Lao Song walked out. Shan Jitong's originally troubled expression involuntarily darkened even further. True enough, Yin Xianlu's perception was above his own. Yin Xianlu smiled calmly and said, I have not discovered Brother Lao's existence. I merely thought that since Brother Shan has appeared, then Brother Lao should also be nearby. Fuck, he was actually bluffing. Shan Jitong suddenly felt like throwing up blood. He had not thought that a prodigy like Yin Xianlu would actually resort to trickery. If Lao Song really was not here, then wouldn't it be a great embarrassment? Lao Song's initially smiling face involuntarily became very awkward. He stared at Yin Xianlu, and suddenly broke into a smile. There was actually a strong sense of charm, and he said, as expected of Brother Yin, intelligence and strength are both top-notch in the world. Yin Xianlu only smiled. Only he himself knew that he had indeed sensed Lao Song's existence. Because he was a celestial Dao physique, and was compatible with great Dao, then, with another person by his side, how could he possibly not sense it? There was no need to say this. For some abilities, it was enough that he only needed to know. The great fortune is right in front of you, and it belongs to the strong, he said, and his whole aura suddenly changed. At first he was like a supreme divine sword, but with a sheath, its edge was not obvious. But now that the divine sword was unsheathed, it exuded an astonishing light. The two of you come at me together, he said to Lao Song and Shan Jitong, his tone calm as if he was only saying something that could not be any more ordinary. Reading on a cell phone was more refreshing. Chapter 1926. Yin Xianlu, you are too arrogant. Shan Jitong showed an expression of fury. Though Yin Xianlu was indeed famous, having the title of the first severing mundane tier, they were both monarch tiers. So how could the gap be so great that two people had to join forces to be a match? He was arrogant to the point of being arrogant. Yin Xianlu stood with his hands clasped behind his back, and calmly said, Whether I am arrogant or not, won't we know after we make our move? Brother Yin, how bold! Lao Song said smilingly. His smile was very charming, but his face really gave off the feeling that it was a woman in disguise. He raised his hand, and his thumb and middle finger curled up slightly. However, Brother Yin, don't seek trouble for yourself. Shan Jitong did not object. His reputation no longer needed to be supported by defeating anyone. Thus, so what if he joined forces with Lao Song to battle Yin Xianlu? Would anyone dare question his talent? He was merely teaching a person whose confidence had soared to the skies a lesson. Then Yin Xianlu come battle. Shan Jitong moved first. Xiao, he turned into a flash of black light, and appeared in front of Yin Xianlu with a flash. Then he shot out a punch. Though this was only a punch, It stirred up the great aura of the heaven and earth. It was as if there was only this fist left in the whole world. And it pressed down on Yin Xianlu. Lao Song also moved. He pushed out an arm and turned into a silver snake. It clearly had fangs, but it did not give off the slightest feeling of malevolence. Instead, it exuded a divine might. The silver snake moved, and actually reached first despite moving later, wrapping around Yin Xianlu. Pa! The snake's body coiled around Yin Xianlu's body, and suddenly wrapped around him, wanting to forcefully crush him into pieces. Brother Yin, you underestimate your opponent too much. Lao Song's charming eyes flickered with fury, because Yin Xianlu did not retaliate at all, allowing the silver snake to wrap around his body, showing strong contempt. Yin Xianlu only smiled. When Shan Jitong's fist blasted over, he stretched out a hand calmly, struggled free from the snake's body, and threw out a punch. Boom! A shock wave spread out, surging out in all directions, and then another wave, and another wave. At least 100 shock waves spread out in the surroundings in the form of blazing light, a spectacular sight. Both Shan Jitong and Lao Song's expressions changed. Shan Jitong was stunned. It was Yin Xianlu who had blocked his attack with a casual punch. Furthermore, it was he who had suffered a slight disadvantage and had been sent flying. Though he had not been injured, the difference in battle prowess could not be any more obvious. And Lao Song clearly knew how terrifying a silver snake entangling one's body was. But just now, Yin Xianlu had easily broken free. It was as if that was not the apparition of the source snake, but a rope that had not been tied tightly. However, the expressions on their faces became much more unsightly. That was because Yin Xianlu was facing off against the two of them at the same time. Even when facing the two of them alone, it was still so easy, and he even had the upper hand. How could they accept this? They are emperors. Emperors, overlooking the 9 heavens, looking down on the mortal world, high and mighty. How could they be defeated? You guys should go out more. Yin Xianlu said calmly. The world is vast, and prodigies are as common as clouds. You all are working behind closed doors, thinking that you are invincible among your peers, just because you have become a monarch tier. Emperors also have their own differences. When he said the last sentence, he shone with boundless radiance. That sharpness and divine might couldn't be concealed at all. He, Yin Xianlu, the king of the celestial path, was the true monarch tier. Shan Jitong and Lao Song were both stunned. Though they had only exchanged a single move, though they still had astonishing ultimate moves that they had not used, when one had reached their level, it would be obvious who was stronger the moment they exchanged blows. Yin Xianlu was indeed the strongest among the younger generation of the Eastern Celestial Realm. To say nothing of strength, just this domineering air in front of them was something that they could not compare to, causing them to actually feel an urge to submit to him and follow him in conquering the world. They were greatly shocked. How could a mighty monarch tier follow another? However, they could not suppress this urge no matter what. Ling Han! Ling Han! Just at this moment, they heard a voice travel out from below. Though it was very hurried, it was unspeakably pleasant to the ears. Yin Xianlu was surprised. He naturally knew who Ling Han was, but who was this woman? There was great doubt here, so he could not use the full extent of his vision, and could only see a blurry figure. However, this figure immediately became clear. Suddenly, an astonishingly beautiful young girl pounced into his eyes. Really beautiful, and pure and innocent. How could there be such a beautiful, such pure girl? Even with Yin Xianlu's Dao heart, he shuddered slightly, and then immediately came back to his senses. Before reaching the 9th heaven celestial king tier, he would not consider anything other than martial art. He definitely had not invited this girl. Though there were many people who had come this time, every single one of them had been carefully selected by Yin Xianlu. There was definitely no one who had come just to make up the numbers. And with his memory, he naturally remembered clearly who he had invited, and what they looked like. Moreover, he had not seen this young girl at the foot of the mountain so fast. He was immediately stunned. The young girl had definitely set off later than them, but she was actually only a little later than him. This strength was really impressive. Strange, with such a prodigy appearing, how could he possibly not know? Shan Jitong and Lao Song also had the same thought. Being able to arrive only a little later than them, this strength was really astonishing. And though the Eastern Celestial Realm was astonishingly large, they could not possibly travel all over and know all the prodigies. But there should only be a few outstanding people. Fuck. Yin Xianlu and the others had not even processed this thought when intense shock appeared on their faces. That was because the young girl was not alone. She had also brought with her an army. An army of Celestial King memory manifestations. An army? What kind of concept was that? Only when their numbers reached a certain extent could they be called an army. And behind the young girl, the number of manifestations was at least in the hundreds. Like wild horses, they surged past in waves, from the hundreds to the thousands, and then over 10,000. Heavens! Even a supreme prodigy like Yin Xianlu almost exclaimed in shock. Who exactly was this young girl, that she had actually provoked so many manifestations? More importantly, she was actually still in the lead all the way, and was not harmed at all. Otherwise, she would have long since been intercepted and drowned out by these manifestations. Her ability to flee was really impressive, and she was also extremely daring, actually daring to draw out so many manifestations. Was she not afraid of being overturned? Pung pung. Ahead, clouds and mist swirled, forming a human figure. Then, it shot towards the young girl. But it had just charged over when it was sent flying by a punch and a kick from the young girl. This so strong. The expressions of Yin Xianlu and the others were grave. To be able to lead such an army of manifestations in a charge, that was only because the young girl's speed was fast enough. But that punch just now had fully displayed her strength. A simple punch, plain and unadorned. Yet it had returned to simplicity, concentrating great Tao into the fist. I am Tao, who can stop me? Get out of the way, get out of the way. The young girl charged straight over, her expression filled with impatience. Whoever does not get out of the way, Niu will send him flying. Chapter 1928. Miss, I would like to seek guidance from you. Yin Xianlu's fighting spirit blazed like fire. Niu was indeed very strong, and was even more powerful than him. But the path of a monarch tier was to defeat opponents that were impossible to defeat along the way, and finally reach the pinnacle. He knew that there was a gap between him and these heaven-defying monsters. This stone of immortal enlightenment was his chance to make up for this gap. Therefore, how could he just give it up? Snatching Niu's things. And you still want to fight with Niu? When Niu became unreasonable, she was also extremely tragic. She glared fiercely at Yin Xianlu and stretched out a finger. Niu is going to beat you up. She was the first to rush out. Hong. 2 wings appeared on her back, completely formed from great Tao symbols, releasing an ancient and noble aura. Ancestral rock, Shan Jitong and Lao Song exclaimed at the same time. As it turned out, this young girl was the heir of the Origin Rock's line. Among the primordial ancestors, the Origin Rock could definitely be considered a first-rate one. No wonder the young girl's speed was so fast. Otherwise, if it had been another 5th severance, they would have long since been caught by those manifestations. Shua, with a flap of her wings, Niu had already appeared in front of Yin Xianlu and shot out a punch. There's no logic, no logic. I'll just blow you up with one punch. Yin Xianlu showed a sliver of irritation. He was a supreme prodigy, a divine fetus that was born on the celestial path. It was suspected that he had been nurtured by heaven and earth. Within the same cultivation level, no one could humiliate him. He clearly knew that Niu's strength was ferocious, and it was not advisable for him to face her head-on. But Niu directly and domineeringly charged over. If he still did not dare to face her head-on, then he would really lose face. A person could be defeated, but his heart could not be defeated. This was the dignity of a monarch. Niu, however, did not care in the slightest. When her fist landed, another great Tao symbol lit up. There was only one, and it was still incomplete, forming the image of a large fish. Even though it was badly damaged, this symbol was too terrifying. It was as if the heavens themselves were being crushed, and the earth was trembling. Strange phenomena appeared in the world. This is too terrifying. No, it's not Zupeng. Lao Song gulped. Kuan-peng Shan Jidong followed up. His eyes were also wide open, his shock indescribable. When the world first came into being, the first batch of living beings all became immortal kings. They were called source beasts. Some source beasts had died in the endless passage of time, while others had ascended to a higher level. Hence, source beasts were divided into various ranks. The origin rock was a first-rate beast, but above that was the king beast. For example, the origin dragon, origin phoenix, and Kuan-peng were all at the king tier. According to legend, there were more than 20 types of king-level source beasts. However, there were only about 10 of them left in the world. Every single one of them had an earth-shattering character. Ninth heaven immortal king. There were 9 heavens in the celestial king tier, and each step was like reaching the heavens. In front of a 9th heaven celestial king, even an 8th heaven celestial king would be a junior. This kind of crushing pressure was like a dividing soul tier to a severing mundane tier. Thus, though Yin Xianlu was the heir of an 8th heaven celestial king, he paled in comparison to her. And they did not have the right to compare with Hunyao at all. They were merely the heirs of 6th or 7th heaven celestial kings, and they were who knew how many times weaker. Bam! Hunyao and Yin Xianlu exchanged a blow. This was a clash of great Tao and regulations. 2 completely different great Tao and regulations shook, forming a frightening shock wave. Then Yin Xianlu was sent flying backwards. This time, he was not sent flying, but he was not much better off. He retreated for over 300 meters before finally coming to a halt. The Kuan-peng soared above the 9 heavens, incredibly agile. It patrolled the skies, tyrannical and fierce beyond compare. This was a source beast that possessed both extreme power and speed. Otherwise, how could it possibly rank as a king beast? Extreme power, Yin Xianlu said slowly. There was not the slightest hint of dispiritedness in his eyes, only an even higher fighting spirit. He had been forced back not because his battle prowess was inferior, but because the regulations that the latter cultivated represented the extreme of power. There were very few source beasts that could match the Kuan-peng in strength. The origin dragon was one. And then what about the others? However, power was only a part of battle prowess. He had a celestial Tao physique, so he would not lose. Again, he roared. The power of his divine fetus was completely activated, and it was as if he had transformed into great Tao. In this battle of heaven and earth, he had the absolute initiative. That was because he was practically the great Tao of heaven and earth. Any movement that his opponent made could not be hidden from him, and he himself could also merge with great Tao. So how could you wound me? Could you wound the great Tao of heaven and earth? If you couldn't, then how could you wound me? Hunyao's ferocious nature was hard to suppress in the first place, and being provoked like this, she immediately pounced over. She still threw a punch, and it was still an incomplete seal, yet it could suppress the heaven and earth, and could be considered invincible. Peng Yin Xianlu was instantly struck, and was sent flying like a shooting star. That was right, he had a celestial Tao physique, and when the power of his divine fetus was activated, he was practically one with the great Tao of heaven and earth. The moment you moved, he would know, and then he could easily dodge, even merging with great Tao. So how could you wound me? But Hunyao's speed was too fast, so fast that it surpassed Yin Xianlu's reaction time. If you wanted to sense great Tao, you would need time, right? Once this information was transmitted, you would be able to react, but Hunyao's speed surpassed this transmission time. Thus, when Yin Xianlu had just sensed which angle Hunyao was going to attack from, he had already been struck by a punch, and had absolutely no time to dodge or merge with great Tao. The pinnacle level of speed. The reason why the rock could become a king-level source beast was because it did not possess the pinnacle of just one kind of regulation. Too lousy, so boring. Hunyao clapped her hands, and then turned toward Shan Jitong and Yin Xianlu, a ferocious glint appearing in her eyes again. Shan Jitong and Yin Xianlu hurriedly shook their heads. Even Yin Xianlu had been sent flying so easily, so they naturally were even less of a match for her. It was better not to provoke Hunyao. You two are too weak, so it's even more boring, Hunyao said, and walked towards the celestial king achieving Tao Stone. Shan Jitong and Yin Xianlu both wanted to vomit blood. Though they were indeed a little weak, They were monarch tiers, after all, and had their own dignity. Hunyeo giggled as she walked to the side of the celestial stone and stretched out her arms to hug the stone. She wanted to pull it out by force and store it into a spatial god tool or something so that she could give it to Ling Han as a gift. So strange, why has something burrowed in? She was surprised. Oh no, why is the stone stuck to my hand? She cried out loudly, without the slightest bit of the restraint that a top-grade beauty should have. She was still that naughty and mischievous little girl from before. I can't shake this stupid rock off. Don't want it, it's really not a good thing. Hunyeo tried her best to throw the celestial stone away, but it was as if this thing had taken root in her body, and she could not throw it away no matter how hard she tried. When they saw this, Yin Xianlu and the others felt like crying. You don't want it, but we do. But the celestial stone was already activated. An endless source power of heaven and earth entered Hunyeo's body, improving her physique and pushing her closer to the great Tao. Hunyeo stopped her meaningless struggle and allowed the celestial stone to do as it pleased. She wore a bitter expression, looking extremely disdainful. Fuck. Chapter 1929. The gloom in the hearts of Yin Xianlu and the others was really indescribable. But what could she do? The celestial king achieving Tao stone had already been taken away by Hunyeo and had also been used by her, so it was impossible for a second person to benefit from it. Where the hell did this girl pop out from? It was hard to imagine that a peerless beauty would have such a personality. The divine stone shone brighter and brighter, even surpassing the sun that the eternal prosperity king had created in the sky. However, when it reached its peak, it only lasted for 10 breaths' time before the divine stone dimmed down, no longer having a hint of light. It was just like an ordinary stone. It was indeed an ordinary stone. All those years ago, the eternal prosperity celestial king had left behind a sliver of source power, and added with the blessing of heaven and earth for an epoch. All the benefits had entered Hunyeo's body. Pa! The stone fell to the ground like an ordinary stone. Stinky rock, stinky rock. Hunyeo was enraged and stomped repeatedly with her foot. He actually dared to stick to her. She couldn't even shake him off. Damn it. However, my physique seems to have improved a little, she muttered to herself as she tilted her head. Just a little bit. Yin Xianlu and the others were all stunned. This was the celestial king achieving Tao stone, and with the blessing of the heaven and earth of an epoch, it could even turn a mortal fetus into a divine fetus. Even for them, it was of supreme benefit. But you've only improved by a tiny amount. If Hunyeo wasn't lying, that meant that her physique was about to reach the pinnacle, and that was why there was practically no room for improvement in the celestial stone. But did Hunyeo look like someone who would lie? Thus, Yin Xianlu and the others were all stunned. They also knew why Hunyeo was so strong. Similarly, at the fifth severance, the powerful physique indeed possessed an incredible advantage, especially with the rock bloodline. That was the strongest source beast in the world. Hunyeo will wait for Ling Han here. Hunyeo found a large rock and sat down. She looked like a gentle, quiet, and beautiful girl. There was only tenderness and beauty in her, and there was no longer any trace of naughtiness. But a moment later, she kicked a stone out of boredom and lost her ladylike image. When Hunyeo took away the celestial king achieving Tao stone, the aura in the mountains suddenly became chaotic and then returned to calm. Although there was still a great deal of pressure, the clouds no longer took human form. Just like that, everyone's speed increased greatly. Come. The fortuitous encounter should have been taken away by someone, Ling Han said. This was a kind of intuition. The Empress nodded. That was what she was thinking as well. However, for the two of them, breaking through to the fifth severance was their greatest opportunity, surpassing everything else. Though they still felt that it was a bit of a pity, their gains had already far outweighed their regrets. Maybe it was Hunyeo. Ling Han smiled. This girl was very energetic. Even if he and the Empress had not entered into the Black Tower to comprehend, Hunyeo would still be able to catch up to them. Then, it would not be impossible for her to obtain the first place. The two of them maintained a constant speed, as they adapted to the terrifying power they obtained after the breakthrough. From the fourth severance to the fifth severance, This leap was really too big. Originally, they would be able to quickly adapt by fighting with the manifestations, but as they fought, the manifestations would disappear. Thus they were still a little lacking. Their speed was not fast, so the people behind them naturally caught up and overtook them one by one. Less than half a day later, Ling Han and the Empress arrived at the peak. Zhu Shuega jumped out, pointing at Ling Han. At first he had wanted to start a battle with Ling Han, but in the end, there was a side issue, and he ended up fighting with someone else. At that time, he had been so engrossed in the battle that he had completely forgotten about the matter of Ling Han. Now that he was free, he naturally remembered it again. Some people would not let go of a grudge just because they were prodigies. What? Ling Han walked towards him, a faint smile curling up the corners of his lips. Previously, he had not been afraid of the other, and now that he had advanced into the fifth severance, he was confident that he could battle Yin Xianlu, so he would definitely not take the other as an opponent. Come fight! Zhu Shuega charged over with large strides. Ling Han! There was a delicate cry, and a beautiful figure charged over. But she was like a primordial beast, crushing everything in her path. Get lost, get lost! Hunyao shouted loudly. What ah? Zhu Shuega was just taking large strides, but was unexpectedly sent flying by a punch. His whole person formed a large character in the air, and then quickly became a small dot, vanishing without a trace. Ling Han! Hunyao pounced over, and jumped into Ling Han's arms in an instant, hugging Ling Han like a big monkey. However, she was as beautiful as a goddess, so it would not ruin the scene. It only made everyone extremely envious of Ling Han. Ling Han smiled and hugged this little girl. They had not seen each other for another few hundred years, and he similarly missed her greatly. Ling Han, did you miss Niao? Hunyao asked delicately. She acted as if there was no one else around, and did not care what the people around them thought of her at all. However, it was a pity for Zhu Shuega, who knew where he had been tossed to now. I miss my Niao, Ling Han said. Hunyao was very pleased, and her beautiful face was all smiles. She kissed Ling Han's cheek heavily. Ling Han, let's have monkeys. This little girl still did not know what it meant to be embarrassed at all. Cough. The Empress coughed lightly, a dignified expression on her face. Another great bewitching spirit. Hunyao turned around, and could not help but bare her teeth, revealing a fierce expression, full of hostility. Niao seems to have seen you before. When she saw the Empress, it was only a clone. Her appearance was different, but they only had the same aura. Ling Han, who is this great bewitching spirit? Hunyao turned around and asked, hugging Ling Han, unwilling to let go. A family, Ling Han said with a smile. Niao is not a family with her. Hunyao stared at the Empress, killing intent burning in her eyes, not concealing it at all. The Empress was unafraid, and also stared at Hunyao. The two women simultaneously burned with a burning fighting spirit. In their eyes, settling each other, and becoming the most important person by Ling Han's side was extremely important, even surpassing everything else. Cough, since everyone is here, then let's sit down and discuss martial art together. Yin Xianlu adjusted his emotions. He thought that he had lost to Hunyao because of his physique, and physique would only give him an advantage before the Celestial King tier. After advancing into the Celestial King tier, the regulations of the heaven were all equal. He was able to pick up and let go. He had already walked out of the shadow of his previous loss, and could face it calmly. This time, he had gathered everyone here not just for the Celestial King tier achieving Dao Stone, but also for an extremely important reason. He definitely could not be disturbed because of that little accident previously. Thus, he naturally could not allow Hunyao and the Empress to continue fighting over his affections like this. He stepped out to stop the two women from continuing to bicker. Shut up! Hunyao and the Empress turned around at the same time, their might astonishing. Yin Xianlu. It was more refreshing to read on his phone. Chapter 1930. Shut up. There was actually someone who dared tell Yin Xianlu to shut up right in front of him. Hiss. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, and an expression of disbelief appeared on their faces. Not one but two. How bold. What background did these two women have to be able to come here? They had to be top-notch emperor tiers. Could it be that they didn't even have this concept, and had to be extremely respectful towards Yen Xianlu? Putting aside the fact that he was the heir of an 8th heaven celestial king, he himself was also a monarch tier. So wasn't that enough? But what shocked everyone even more was that after Yen Xianlu was rebuked, he actually did not get angry. He merely shook his head, showing an expression of helplessness. It had to be that Yen Xianlu didn't fight with women. But not everyone thought so. They looked at Hunyao. This was a person they had never seen before. And if they top-notch emperor tiers couldn't even remember this, then they couldn't be called emperor tiers in vain. This young girl had come uninvited, and Yen Xianlu actually did not fly into a rage. What did this mean? She's that demonic young girl. Scammer. Someone recognized Hunyao. These were the few people that Hunyao had overtaken along the way. Though there were many paths to the top of the mountain, there were also many people here. Thus, after Hunyao chose a path, there would definitely be a great many people that she had overtaken, and they naturally would also suffer greatly because of her. Immediately, at least 10 people targeted Hunyao, all of them seething with anger. Though Hunyao was also shockingly beautiful, her style was completely different from the Empress's. The Empress was noble and graceful, and thought that everyone in the world should submit to her. She had a pride that was deeply rooted in her very bones. Hunyao was wild and willful, and the little movements that she revealed were extremely mischievous, just like a child that could not grow up. Precisely because of this, Hunyao did not have a strong presence like the Empress, so beautiful that she could steal one's soul. In truth, if the Empress did what she did, there would probably be very few that could be angry. Of course, the Empress would not do such a risky thing either. Hunyao bared her teeth, like an enraged female leopard. What, you guys want to fight? Those dozen or so people were naturally even more furious. You caused us to be stepped on by manifestations, and you actually did not feel the slightest bit of embarrassment. Hehe, everyone please calm down. Yen Xianlu stepped forward and pressed his hands together. You should listen to me first, and tell me the reason why I have invited everyone here this time. He must be very depressed right now. If it was in the past, he would definitely be the center of everyone. Everyone would stare at him without blinking once he said something. Why would he need to repeat it over and over again? But Hunyao was too powerful. Even if he used his ultimate move, Hunyao also had it. And it was an incredibly terrifying one at that. In an instant, she had shattered several tens of thousands of manifestations. This was something that he was far inferior to. However, Yen Xianlu was Yen Xianlu after all. With his words, everyone suppressed their anger for the time being, at least. Hunyao wanted to glare again, but Ling Han stroked her head. Instantly, an expression of enjoyment appeared on her face, and she no longer fought back. Everyone clicked their tongues in wonder. Hunyao was so fierce, but in front of Ling Han, she was so gentle. This was really inconceivable. But at the same time, he was also filled with jealousy towards Ling Han. After all, putting aside Hunyao's ferocity, this was a great beauty with unparalleled beauty. Moreover, in front of Ling Han, wasn't this great beauty also as gentle as water? Why can't I meet a woman like this? Hunyao continued to stare at the Empress. With Ling Han on the side, they definitely could not fight, but the battle had already begun. Ahem, this time, I have invited everyone here mainly because I want to form an alliance. Yen Xianlu finally got to the point. Ha 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 ha. Shan Jitong immediately laughed loudly. An alliance? What a joke. Making me form an alliance with these trash. His eyes swept over them, filled with disdain towards everyone. Of course, when his eyes swept over Hunyao, his pupils contracted. Hunyao's ferocity was right before his eyes. Yen Xianlu's expression became stern, and he said, Brother Shan, if you have any objections to this, you can leave immediately. There is no need to mock and ridicule us. But I can tell you that you will definitely regret it. Shan Jitong was startled, and showed a sliver of hesitation. Should he immediately flick his sleeves and leave, or stay and listen? If he stayed, that would be a little like slapping himself in the face. but Yin Xianlu actually said that he would regret it. So he definitely had great confidence. Monarch tears like them definitely would not make up nonsense at this kind of time. After hesitating again and again, Shan Jitong still sat back down on his original rock. He made up his mind that he would not speak again in the future. Even if Shan Jitong slapped himself, how could the others dare laugh at him? They were all expressionless, acting as if they had not seen anything. Only Lao Song's lips curled up in a cold smirk, expressing his disdain towards Shan Jitong. How fun! Meanwhile, Hunyao clapped her hands, her voice very crisp and clear. Shan Jitong only acted as if he had not seen or heard anything, and closed his eyes. Out of sight, out of mind. Everyone clicked their tongues in wonder. It seemed like both Yin Xianlu and Shan Jitong were full of restraint towards this young girl, which made everyone even more curious. Who exactly was this girl? This time, Yin Xianlu was rather grateful to Hunyao. Even he could not possibly completely suppress Shan Jitong, but Hunyao could. True enough, evil people needed to be tempered by evil people. The celestial realm is very large. Merely the boundless seas are enough to separate the eastern and western celestial realms, and our eastern celestial realm is further divided into 33 heavens. Yin Xianlu began to introduce his geographical knowledge. This caused some people to show expressions of impatience, had they come to listen to this. However, there were also a great many whose expressions did not change at all. If they could become top-notch emperor tiers, how could they possibly not even have this bit of patience? Furthermore, would Yin Xianlu say these things for no reason? Our calm peace heaven, to be honest, can only be ranked at the bottom of the 33 heavens, on par with the wide prosperity heaven and the far south heaven, Yin Xianlu said calmly. Not to mention that the overall strength of the western celestial realm is above that of the eastern celestial realm. In the whole celestial realm, our calm peace heaven can only be ranked at the bottom. Some time ago, I planned to make a trip to the western celestial realm, but in the end, I did not make the trip. Instead, I went to the wide prosperity heaven, planning to train there first. In the end, I encountered an opponent that I was no match for. Suddenly, the crowd was in an uproar. Who was Yin Xianlu? He was a divine fetus born on the celestial path. And it was very likely that he was an existence nurtured by heaven and earth. He should be a supreme monarch tier that was absolutely invincible among his peers. So how could he possibly be defeated by someone? Brother Yen, it should be that opponent's cultivation level is too high, right? Someone immediately asked with a smile, holding on to a sliver of hope. Yin Xianlu shook his head and said, "That's not the case. That person is the same as I, both fifth severance." When these words were spoken, everyone fell silent. Shan Jitong opened his mouth to speak, but ultimately could not speak. He was very unconvinced, but he knew his own limits. His battle prowess should be slightly inferior to Yin Xianlu's, so even Yin Xianlu was no match for him. So what did he count as? Lao Song was much calmer, though his pair of seductive eyes had become even more slender, like that of a venomous snake. That person's name is Shi Xiuwen, Yin Xianlu continued. According to him, his strength can only rank 9th in the wide prosperity heaven. Pooh, a considerable number spluttered. Impossible. Impossible. Yin Xianlu was so powerful. Yet he was actually defeated by someone who was merely ranked 9th in the wide prosperity heaven. How could anyone believe this? Chapter 1932. Blazing Flame Lightning Strike. Wood is born with many twists and turns. In the process of growth, it will continuously be burned by blazing flames and struck by divine lightning. Yin Xianlu began to introduce. In terms of quantity, blazing flame lightning strike which should be the most abundant among the source powers of heaven and earth. When the last flaming lightning struck tree dies, countless flaming lightning struck trees will be born, but they're just seedlings. Countless of them will die during this period, and when one of them successfully advances, the other seedlings will wither at the same time. This is a source power of heaven and earth, so even if we cannot obtain the acknowledgement of the blazing flame lightning strike wood, even if we can only obtain a withered seedling, It will be of great help to us in comprehending the regulations of wood. He paused, and then continued. What my master discovered was not a single blazing flame lightning strike wood, but a forest of lightning strike wood. A forest of blazing flame lightning strike wood. And only one tree king could stand out and become a new source power of heaven and earth. When they heard him say this, those who were initially not very interested all became restless. It was too difficult to obtain the acknowledgement of a source power of heaven and earth. Basically, only celestial kings could do it. But if they could obtain a withered seedling of a lightning strike wood, that would indeed be a precious treasure. And it was guaranteed that every ascending origin tier would go crazy for it. Ling Han, do you want it? Hunyeo asked as she stuck to Ling Han's embrace. Niu will snatch it for you. Her eyes shone, no different from that little girl of the past. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly. When he thought of the various experiences he and Hunyeo had previously, an indescribable sense of bliss rose up in him. I want to join. I want to join too. Immediately, a great many people volunteered, wanting to join Yin Xianlu's team. Though Shan Jitong and Lao Song were also incredibly tempted, they respected their status and did not say it out loud. Instead, they were waiting for Yin Xianlu to take the initiative to invite them. Yet, it was as if Yin Xianlu had not arrived, completely ignoring their existence. Basically, everyone said they wanted to go to that mystery realm of heaven and earth. Yin Xianlu did not accept everyone. That formation could stack the power of 10 people, or even increase it tenfold. That would definitely be a huge pressure on everyone. If they did not have the support of a powerful physique, then there was no need for their opponents to break the formation. They themselves would collapse first. As the saying went, it was better to have nothing than to have something inferior. After choosing for a long while, Yin Xianlu had only chosen 6 people. Finally, Shan Jitong and Lao Song showed expressions of pride. No matter how capable you, Yin Xianlu, were, in the end, you still had to take the initiative to extend an invitation to them. Miss, are you interested in joining us? Yin Xianlu extended an invitation to Hunyeo. Niu doesn't want that. Hunyeo said in disgust, and glared at Yin Xianlu. You dare have any ideas about Niu? I'll chop off your dog head and feed it to the dogs. Ling Han was sweating profusely. Wasn't this letting his own kind kill each other? Yin Xianlu was snubbed, and could only rub his nose. However, Hunyeo was indeed strong, and it was very possible that she was not weaker than Shi Xiuwen. She did not need to rely on the formation at all to be able to fight against her. However, no matter what, Hunyeo was still a member of the Calm Peace Heaven, so it was fine even if she did not join his team. My master said that this is an opportunity for everyone in the Calm Peace Heaven, so I'll be bringing everyone there when the time comes. After entering the secret realm, I hope everyone can help each other. After all, our enemy is Wide Prosperity Heaven, Yin Xianlu said solemnly. If I discover that someone is still actively provoking internal strife in the secret realm, then don't blame me for not being polite in the future. Dang! Everyone nodded. At present, they were all competitors, but if Wide Prosperity Heaven joined in, then they would be a whole, and their fists should all be directed outwards. Brother Yan, can I lend you a hand? Lao Song was the first to relent. Yin Xianlu had already raised the topic to the overall situation of the whole Calm Peace Heaven. In comparison, his restraint naturally appeared pretentious. Of course, Yin Xianlu said smilingly. Brother Yin, there's me too. Shan Jitong could only say shamelessly. Yin Xianlu nodded, but did not follow up on his victory to mock Shan Jitong. He had lofty ambitions, and disdained to use this kind of method to attack his opponent. Moreover, he was already the strongest among the younger generation of the Calm Peace Heaven, and did not treat Shan Jitong as an opponent at all. His target was the supreme monarch tier of the other 33 heavens of the Eastern Celestial Realm. Hunyeo was not willing to join, and this caused Yin Xianlu to be slightly disappointed. If he could obtain such an elite to join his team, his chances of victory would increase greatly. However, seeing that Hunyeo was so attached to Ling Han, he decided to use a roundabout strategy. Ling Han, we finally meet. He smiled slightly. Ling Han nodded and said, I have long heard of your great name, and you have not disappointed me. Hiss, when they heard Ling Han's words, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. How arrogant of you. A mere alchemist. Where did you get such arrogant courage? Yin Xianlu couldn't help but be slightly angered. Though Zhao Qingfeng had not been killed by Ling Han, it could still be attributed to Ling Han. His subordinate had been killed, and with his protective personality, he was actually already very displeased with Ling Han. However, Ling Han was too young. His talent in alchemy was astonishing, and his potential in martial art was also not bad. That was why he invited Ling Han, intending to recruit Ling Han. In his eyes he, the king of the younger generation of the calm peace heaven, had extended an olive branch, and Ling Han naturally could only gladly agree. With Hunyo's support, had he gotten carried away? Are you willing to join our team? He asked calmly. This was for Hunyo's sake. Ling Han cracked a smile and said, I am a bit stubborn. As the saying goes, I'd rather be the head of a chicken than the tail of an ox. Come, let's have a spar. If I win, you guys will join me, and I will be your leader. This was really not afraid of the wind cutting his tongue. Yet Yin Xianlu was not angered. In his eyes, Ling Han was only a madman, and there was absolutely no need to take the words of a madman to heart. He asked calmly, and if you lose? Then I'll just leave. I've already said, I won't be the tail of an ox, Ling Han said smilingly. Everyone fainted. So it turned out that others should listen to you? Ling Han awesome. Hunyo planted a kiss on Ling Han's cheek, feeling very pleased. On the side, the empress similarly wore a proud expression. How could her husband possibly be subordinate to others? What a joke. Yin Xianlu was also startled. You're too shameless, aren't you? His expression darkened, and he said, all right, then let's exchange a few moves. He was going to teach Ling Han a lesson, and let the latter know that it was a very shameful thing to borrow someone else's power. Ling Han patted Hunyo's back, indicating for her to come down. Don't, just hug Nyo like this and fight. Hunyo hugged Ling Han, unwilling to let go. At present, she did not want to leave Ling Han's side for even a moment. Ling Han thought for a moment, and walked out just like that. At his cultivation level, not to mention hugging one person, even hugging 10,000 people would basically not affect his battle prowess. Since the little girl was begging him like this, then he would just satisfy her little wish. Come. Ling Han crooked a finger at Yin Xianlu. Was he challenging the strongest in the severing mundane tier? He was too careless. Yet Yin Xianlu did not dare to be careless. He was deeply aware of Hunyo's strength. If she also made a move, then the possibility of him being defeated was very high. Chapter 1933. Yin Xianlu strode out, his brocade robes fluttering. His handsomeness was not earth-shattering, but his bearing was otherworldly, inspiring admiration. This was originally a very solemn matter, but Yin Xianlu's opponent actually had a slender young girl, hanging off his body like a koala. No matter how comical this was, how comical. Are you really going to fight? Yin Xianlu's expression was dark. At first, he had planned very well, gathering the power of all the prodigies to activate the celestial fate. He would first obtain the celestial king achieving Dao Stone, and after refining it, he would improve his physique, then lead everyone to charge into the mystery realm, to seize the source power of heaven and earth. If he obtained a source power of heaven and earth, he really would not fear anyone in the same cultivation level. However, an accident occurred at the very first step. Though he very quickly suppressed his disappointment, he could not possibly forget it just like that. Though the celestial stone was obtained by Hunyo, if one looked at the source, it was actually Ling Han's fault. If it were not for Ling Han, how could Hunyo have come here? Old enmity, new hatred, caused Yin Xianlu to especially loathe this villain Ling Han. Putting on an act, using his connections to intimidate others. He stretched out his right hand. Wang! The surrounding air vibrated, forming a transparent sword in his hand. Because of the refraction of light, the existence of this sword could be seen. Ling Han smiled, one hand holding Hunyo, the other pushing forward. 4 fingers curled into a fist, and only a thumb pressed out towards Yin Xianlu. Advancing into the 5th severance, forming a world of its own, and every movement would be a powerful attack. Go! Yan Xianlu struck out with his sword. Instantly, light filled the skies, dazzling the 9 heavens. Ling Han maintained his press of the finger. The millions and millions of stars in his body all shone, the Tao of heaven and earth reaching out to grab. He pressed down, and the heaven and earth resonated, turning into a dragon, and then a phoenix. The dragon and phoenix danced together, greeting the sword light. Boom! The sword light clashed with the dragon and phoenix, exploding into an incredibly dazzling light, as if it had become a sun, illuminating the world. When the light dissipated, Ling Han and Yan Xianlu were still standing facing each other. Neither had taken a step back, and neither had any signs of being injured. What? Seeing this scene, everyone exploded in shock. Ling Han actually had the ability to battle Yan Xianlu. Hiss! Yan Xianlu was a monarch tier. The 5th severance was far, far too difficult. In the whole of the calm peace heaven, there were at least several hundred celestial king tier sects, and there were close to 20 at least above the 5th heaven. But what about monarch tiers? At least among the present severing mundane tiers, only a mere 3 people had reached this level. Emperors, of course, should be invincible. But now, it was extremely likely that a 4th monarch tier had appeared. It was not extremely likely but definitely. Otherwise, no matter how strong a 4th severance was, it was impossible for him to receive a strike from a 5th severance. That would be an absolute suppression. Everyone was enlightened. No wonder Ling Han dared to be so arrogant. Emperors were naturally arrogant. But aren't you an alchemist? How can an alchemist be so fierce? Yan Xianlu's eyes lit up. He was not envious because he had gained another monarch-level opponent. On the contrary, his fighting spirit was blazing, and there was even a kind of gratification. The calm peace heaven was too weak, and urgently needed the emergence of a few monarch tiers. Only then could there possibly be more celestial kings and high-level celestial kings in the future. Otherwise, with the fierce competition in the celestial realm, it was possible that the calm peace heaven would be invaded by other forces, and a great reshuffle would occur. All right, he exclaimed softly. Previously I had thought that you were arrogant, but I was wrong about you. I apologize to you. Ling Han smiled and said, At first, I had also thought that you were an arrogant and haughty person, but now, I have also taken back such thoughts. You are a good person. The two of them exchanged a smile, and actually had a mutual appreciation for each other. There were too few monarch tiers, and every one of them could become an extremely good opponent and confidant. Ling Han, don't waste words with him. Quickly defeat him. Niu still wants to kiss you, Niu said shamelessly as she wrapped her arms around Ling Han's neck. She was open and frank, and said whatever she had on her mind. Ling Han could only shrug and said, Brother Yan, then let's limit it to 10 moves. His impression of Yan Xianlu had changed greatly, so he naturally did not insist on defeating the latter and stepping on him. All right, 10 moves. Yan Xianlu nodded. He was indeed very proud, but he was also human. Emperor tiers, king tiers, so what right did they have to make him lower himself to face them? Only monarch tiers could treat him as equals. This was actually very normal. Ling Han moved, and his figure charged out like a streak of light. Yan Xianlu did not show any weakness, and began a battle with Ling Han. Pung 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 pung. The two of them did not hold back, and used one celestial technique after another, displaying their strongest side. 10 moves very quickly passed. The two of them stopped at the same time, and exchanged a smile. All their previous grudges had been resolved. This was a kind of mutual appreciation between men. Let's descend the mountain. They walked side by side, heading down the mountain. Because there were no manifestations causing trouble, their speed was naturally not slow. After 10 days, they had arrived at the foot of the mountain. Gagaga, brat, do you think you can escape from my grasp? Amidst strange laughter, an old man suddenly appeared. Boom! Endless might spread out, startling the 33 heavens. The expressions of all the prodigies changed slightly. They were all emperor tiers and monarch tiers, in the same cultivation level. But that was only limited to the same cultivation level. Even monarch tiers could match Yang Soul, or even Yin Soul. But this old man was definitely not in the dividing soul tier. but had far surpassed it. However, though everyone was shocked, none of them were afraid. This was a gathering hosted by Yin Xianlu, and behind Yin Xianlu was an eighth heaven celestial king. If someone still came to cause trouble at such a gathering, then where would Yin Xianlu and the eternal prosperity celestial king put their face? If this old man wanted to make a move, then a celestial king would definitely appear and directly blast him into pieces. Ling Han's eyes narrowed, and he said, "Old demon blood shadow. Brat, I really did not misjudge you. I had initially thought that you would need 10 million years to be able to obtain the natural peach seal for me, but I had not thought that you would actually only use a few years. Not bad, not bad. Why don't you quickly hand it over to me now?" Old demon blood shadow said, his expression filled with anticipation. Everyone was afraid of death. What more for this kind of high and mighty figure? He had suffered from the immortal's tribulation, and if it flared up again next time, he would definitely be done for. Thus, he was naturally incredibly thirsty for the natural peach seal, causing even a mighty ascending origin tier ancestor to lose his composure. Ling Han shrugged and said, "I'm really sorry, but it has already been used up." Used up? Old demon blood shadow was tongue-tied. His first reaction was disbelief, unable to accept this kind of truth, because he had pinned all his hopes of survival on this. When he suddenly heard this news, his whole head was struck with a boom. Then, he suddenly flew into a great rage. "Brat, you dare deceive me. Do you not want your life anymore?" His gaze was sinister, exuding a powerful killing intent. This brat actually dared to trick him. How could he be so audacious? Xiao, just at this moment, a figure suddenly charged out, pressing a palm down at Ling Han. Z, endless lightning flashed, its might incredibly terrifying. Ba Yao he had already been waiting for Ling Han for a very long time, and the moment he saw Ling Han appear, he immediately made his move. He did not need any natural peach seal, so his move was a fatal one. He wanted to kill Ling Han and directly seize the treasures on him. Chapter 1934. You dare! Old demon blood shadow roared and moved to attack Ba Yao. It was not that he could not bear to lose Ling Han's life, but he did not know whether the natural peach seal had been brought out by Ling Han or not. If it had been brought out, then there was no harm in killing Ling Han. He could just take it away. But what if he had not, and was still in Alchemy City? Then what was he doing all this trouble for? Furthermore, he too suspected that Ling Han had a rare treasure on him, and had long since decided to kill Ling Han after he had obtained the natural peach seal, and take all of the latter's fortune. Naturally, he could not allow Ling Han to die at the hands of another. Thus he immediately moved, and was extremely ruthless. Ba Yao was slightly startled. This old bastard actually dared to make a move against him? Are your dog eyes blind? Do you know who I am? You're courting death, he rebuked coldly, and turned around to deliver a palm strike at old demon blood shadow. Lightning overflowed, turning into a long lightning river. Endless patterns of great Tao surged within, terrifying beyond compare. Old demon blood shadow paled in shock. They were both in the ascending origin tier, but the gap between him and the other was practically indescribably wide. Pung! With a single strike, old demon blood shadow was sent flying. Pooh! A mist of blood shot out of his whole body, his aura dropping endlessly. He was only in the ascending origin tier small mastery, but Ba Yao had cultivated it to the consummate level. The gap between them was completely incalculable. Old demon blood shadow fell, and barely managed to straighten his body. His head of white hair floated down. At first, it was already sparse, but now, the middle area was completely empty, and he had become bald. His complexion was frighteningly pale, and his left eye was even protruding out of its socket, appearing very frightening. Pooh! He continuously threw up blood, and as he did so his hair fell out. Every mouthful of blood was flickering with lightning. This was because Ba Yao's attack was too frightening, penetrating deep into his bones. Old demon blood shadow could not help but pale with fright. In the first place, because of the immortal's tribulation, his blood essence had dried up, and he had turned from a handsome and elegant man into a terrible old man. Now that Ba Yao's attack had directly injured his life force, every mouthful of blood he spat out was equivalent to using up a sliver of his life force. This caused the old injuries left behind by Immortal's tribulation to become restless, and they began to slash at his cultivation. His aura instantly plummeted, falling from the ascending origin tier to the Immortal Palace tier, then the 5th Palace tier, 4th Palace tier, 3rd Palace tier, and then all the way to the 1st Palace tier. However, he was still unable to stop his aura from plummeting to the Dividing Soul tier, and then from the Heaven Soul tier. Is that an exaggeration? Not at all. The consummate level of the ascending origin tier in the first place possessed the ability to kill a small tier cultivator with a single strike, and though Ba Yao had only done so casually, how could the former holy son of the Thundercloud Palace be insignificant? Added with the fact that old Demon Blood Shadow was nearing the end of his lifespan, his battle prowess would be able to reach a fraction of his peak condition. Not only did the attack not kill him, but his cultivation had also fallen. This was already very, very good. Old Demon Blood Shadow's cultivation level fell all the way to the middle stage of Een Soul, and only then did he barely manage to stop it. This made his limbs go numb, and an endless despair welled up in him. Yes, cultivation level could be recultivated. He could still cultivate from Een Soul to Earth Soul, Heaven Soul, and all the way up. But if his life force was injured again, how long could he live? 100 years, 10,000 years? Before he could cultivate to the ascending origin tier, and break through to great accomplishment to replenish his life force, and obtain an endless lifespan, he would have long since died. In other words, though Ba Yao's attack had not killed him, it had still sentenced him to death. Old Demon Blood Shadow trembled. 100 million years would pass very quickly, and his present lifespan might not even be 100 years. So how could he not tremble in fear? All this took a long time to describe, but was actually only the matter of 1 or 2 breaths. The process of the exchange was also as fast as lightning, and severing mundane tiers practically could not see it clearly. What had happened? Everyone was a little dumbfounded. Why did they feel that the scene was a little off? Wasn't old Demon Blood Shadow here to make trouble for Ling Han? Why had he moved on his behalf instead? And in such a miserable state? This was definitely true love. Ba Yao only glanced at old Demon Blood Shadow calmly, and then withdrew his gaze. Though the latter was also in the ascending origin tier, in his eyes, he was a minor character. Aside from ascending origin tiers that had come from Celestial King tier forces, who else would he take seriously? Overestimating one's capabilities, he did not kill him either. Killing this kind of trash would only be a waste of time. I am very interested in the things on you, Ba Yao said, his eyes fixed on Ling Han. At first he did not want to waste words, and directly kill him to snatch his treasures. With his soul extracted, no secrets could possibly be hidden. However, since he had been stopped by someone and had failed once, he was magnanimous and unruffled. After all, as an ascending origin tier elite, face was still important. Previously, he had succeeded in his attack, and directly fled far away. He had complete confidence that even Yin Xianlu could forget about seeing his appearance clearly, and remembering his aura. So what? Ling Han asked smilingly, without the slightest hint of fear. No matter what they are, they all belong to me now, Ba Yao said calmly. Soundlessly, he had already locked down the surrounding space. In this way, unless a celestial king specially swept his divine sense over, it was impossible for him to discover what had happened here. In this way, everything was under his control. Ling Han shook his head. I don't think so. Brat, do you think this is still Alchemy City? Ba Yao scoffed. There were too many heirs of celestial kings here. And there was even a super prodigy like Yin Xianlu. He naturally did not dare to kill recklessly. But what about Ling Han? He knew very well that the other was only a mere holy son of Alchemy City. So what if he killed him? Even if Alchemy City went to the Thundercloud Palace to complain, so what? What could they do to him? What a joke. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, This is indeed not Alchemy City, and there is no master to stand up for me. However, there are many wondrous things in this world. Oh, for example, Ba Yao asked casually as he strode towards Ling Han. His speed was not fast, But it was as if the great Tao was crushing down with each step, causing everyone's hearts to feel indescribably uncomfortable. The might of an ascending origin tier. How could a severing mundane tier match it? He deliberately walked very slowly because previously, in Alchemy City, he had been forced to leave by Grandmaster Zicheng, and had lost all face. Though he was not taking revenge on alchemist Zicheng now, Ling Han was the cause of everything. He still felt a little good torturing him before killing him. Of course, this was completely because he had absolute confidence. Otherwise he would directly kill him, search his soul, seize his treasure and leave. Thud. He walked over step by step, and a great many people immediately showed expressions of discomfort, feeling as if their hearts were about to explode. That was really the case. Under such terrifying pressure, everyone's eyeballs were popping out, looking frighteningly savage. Damn it! Hunyo was furious, pointing a finger at Ba Yao. Damn big guy. You actually dare be fierce to Nyo's Ling Han, and dare make Nyo feel uncomfortable. You're dead for sure. Ba Yao naturally would not take Hunyo's threat to heart. He only scoffed, and the gaze he directed at Hunyo was a little sinister. He had never abstained from female charms, especially after being stuck in the ascending origin tier for too long a time. He had developed a great many hobbies, and the area between men and women was naturally one of them. Furthermore, it took up an extremely large portion of his time. This young girl was both beautiful and pure. Though she was a little fierce, what use could she be in front of him? Oh, I'm dead for sure. Ba Yao shook his head. I don't believe it. You should believe it. An icy cold voice rang out behind Ba Yao, filled with dense killing intent. Chapter 1936. Brat come. Old Demon Blood Shadow waved the blood shadow behind him, an unnatural flush on his pale face. His life force had been greatly depleted, and it was actually already not easy for him to linger on while at death's door. This battle would definitely cause his originally ridiculously short lifespan to approach the end, but he already saw this battle as his last hope of survival, and had bet everything on it, so he naturally did not care. Take down Ling Han. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, Old bastard, you will only be beaten to a pulp by me. Xiao, his figure charged out, and he punched out. You overestimate yourself. Old Demon Blood Shadow said proudly. Though his cultivation level had dropped, he was still in soul level no matter what. Even if he ignored a major tier, he was still 2 minor levels higher than Ling Han. He stretched out a right hand that was like a withered claw, and grabbed towards Ling Han's right wrist. Wang, the stars in Ling Han's body shone, drawing on great Tao and drawing on the power of regulation. An ancient seal immediately appeared on his fist, which looked a little like a ball of flames. This was a seal of great Tao drawn from the 9 heavens flame, celestial king tier level. Unfortunately, Ling Han's cultivation level was too low, and this seal of great Tao was also incomplete, giving off a feeling of dilapidation, but an ancient and noble aura was faintly spreading, shaking the 9 heavens. Old Demon Blood Shadow's expression changed slightly. The might of this strike from Ling Han had greatly surpassed his expectations. A severing mundane tier could actually be so strong? Hold on. He suddenly recalled a legend. It was said that there was a supreme prodigy that could break through the restraints of heaven and earth, and deliver another strike after the 4th severance. 5th severance and could rival Yang's soul. Hiss, this guy was actually a legendary monster. Don't blame old Demon Blood Shadow for being ignorant. Though he was an ascending origin tier, he had always been a loner, and did not have any great sex to rely on. So how could he possibly know too many secrets? Being able to react. It was already very good that there were still 5th severance prodigies in this world. Wang. Old Demon Blood Shadow's claw approached, its speed becoming slower and slower. That seal on Ling Han's fist had already come into effect, preventing him from invading. Amidst the intense friction, his palm began to burn with flames. The old bastard did not mind, but when he stretched out a few more inches, he discovered that his right hand was actually in extreme pain. The burn will hurt. It wasn't because of the intense friction that caused the fire, but because the symbols that Ling Han had condensed had triggered the laws of fire and burned his skin. How is that possible? His expression changed in shock. Even if Ling Han was a fifth severance, which was equivalent to a Yang Soul elite, he himself still had Yin Soul tier level cultivation. So how could he possibly be wounded by Ling Han? Old bastard. You're only able to bully me because your cultivation level is much higher than mine. Putting aside the fact that we're at the same cultivation level, even if you're 2 cultivation levels higher than me, I'd still be able to suppress you. Ling Han roared. His figure suddenly advanced, and he threw a punch that contained all of his fury. The black murderous curse could indeed temper him, but being forcefully planted in his body was naturally a different concept. Don't say that only a few years had passed in the real world, but added with the years that he had spent in the time cultivation chamber, that was a few hundred years' time, and had endured the agony of the black murderous curse several hundred times. Every time it flared up, Ling Han would want to give old demon blood shadow a good thrashing. Adding it up again and again, his fury had also accumulated to the limit, and now, it was time to vent it all out to his heart's content. Pung! A punch shot out, and the regulations turned into something tangible. Innumerable seals could be seen appearing, incredibly profound. Tung tung tung. Ling Han and old demon blood shadow both took a few steps back, and both found their footing. They were evenly matched in this exchange. Old demon blood shadow's expression was extremely ugly. He had now placed all his hopes on Ling Han, wanting to capture him, and then use him to threaten a celestial king. But Ling Han was actually so strong that his wishful thinking was about to come to nothing. His lifespan might only be 100 years, and presently, he was forcibly burning what little life force he had left in battle. Who knew? He might directly die in the midst of battle. He did not want to die. Did not want to die. Old demon blood shadow roared loudly. Boom! The blood shadow behind him surged madly, and then turned into a gale that swept toward Ling Han. When it had circulated for a certain distance, this gale actually dispersed, and turned into black dots that filled the sky. Ling Han's gaze swept over them, and saw that these black dots were actually numerous insects that fluttered about in the sky, making buzzing sounds. Every insect was about the same appearance as a mosquito, but they were much larger. They were about the size of a little finger, and they had a long proboscis that was incredibly sharp, and even exuded a metallic luster. The insects filled the sky, descending toward Ling Han. In that one instant, Ling Han's body was covered with mosquitoes. All of them used their sharp proboscis to stab him, desiring to suck his blood. Ling Han did not move. He wanted to see if these things could do anything to his physique. Old demon blood shadow revealed a cold smile. This brat was too arrogant. He completely did not know that these blood shadow insects were his trump card, and could even be used in tandem with the black murderous curse. When the blood shadow insects attacked, he would then activate the black murderous curse, attacking from within and without. If one only cared about the inside of one's body, then the blood shadow insects would pierce through one's body and suck one's blood. These blood shadow insects were actually formed from a portion of his soul, and the blood essence they sucked could be fed back to him. Though it would not allow his life force to recover, it would at least be of some benefit. And if one cared about the outside, the black murderous curse could similarly steal one's life. What old demon blood shadow needed to control was not to accidentally activate the black murderous curse too much and kill Ling Han. That way, he would not be able to threaten that celestial king. Explode! He exclaimed softly. Ling Han instantly felt his heart wrench, and his entire body was in indescribable pain. Gagaga! Do you think that the black murderous curse can only activate once a year? Old demon blood shadow scoffed. Since this black murderous curse was planted by this old man, then as long as this old man wills it, it can activate at any time. Kneel before this old man. The old thing was just feeling very pleased with himself, when he suddenly revealed an expression of disbelief. Because Ling Han was standing perfectly fine, and did not reveal any expression of pain. Furthermore, none of the blood shadow insects were able to pierce through his skin either. It was as if that was not a person at all, but a supreme divine metal. How was this possible? You. This time, old demon blood shadow's heart and spirit were truly trembling. Firstly, he did not dare to believe it, And secondly, he would not be able to take down Ling Han like this. And then he would not be far from death. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, I have already endured this black murderous curse several hundred times, and have long since become able to endure it. Monster. Old Demon Blood Shadow completely did not dare to believe it. How tyrannical and painful was the black murderous curse. This was not a technique that he had created, but he had obtained it in an ancient cave abode, and it was extremely likely that it had been created by a celestial king. He had once used it on many people who had claimed that their will was as tough as iron, but at most 3 times, every single one of them would wail miserably and beg for mercy, and do whatever he wanted them to do. For example, there was a person who had claimed that he was madly in love with his wife, and when he could not endure the black murderous curse, he killed his wife with his own hands. There was an immortal palace realm elite who had claimed to be a chaste woman, and after being afflicted with the black murderous curse, she endured the humiliation and entered a brothel, where she was casually toyed with by lowly cultivators. This caused Old Demon Blood Shadow to be filled with confidence in the black murderous curse. No one would be able to withstand the pain after the curse was activated. Chapter 1937. But what about Ling Han? He had endured several hundred curses. It should be noted that only 4 or 5 years had passed, and that black murderous curse should have only flared up 4 or 5 times. So how could there be as many as several hundred? There was only one possibility. Ling Han had entered the time cultivation chamber. Thus 4 or 5 years had passed normally, but he had experienced several hundred years. How could anyone be like this? The black murderous curse was clearly so painful that it could make even the most resolute person obediently call him father. This was also the reason why he had been at ease in allowing Ling Han to go to Alchemy City. He was certain that Ling Han would definitely do as he pleased. Who would have thought that this freak would actually think that the number of times the black murderous curse flared up was too few, and had entered the time cultivation chamber of his own accord to torment it? Old Demon Blood Shadow was really dumbfounded. He had never seen someone like Ling Han before. Was he still human? He was practically immortal metal in human form. Then die. A hint of madness flashed through Old Demon Blood Shadow's eyes. Since he could not take down Ling Han, and was destined to die, then he might as well kill Ling Han, and pull someone down with him. Die! His right hand spread out, as if he was pulling invisible threads. He had completely detonated the black murderous curse, intending to kill Ling Han. However, after this die, there was only the rustling of the mountain winds, and Ling Han was still standing perfectly fine. How is this possible? If you could endure the pain of the black murderous curse flared up, that could only mean that your willpower was terrifying. But he had now unleashed the fatal blow of the black murderous curse. This had nothing to do with willpower. It was directly taking someone's life. Why didn't you die? Ling Han broke into a grin, raised his right foot, and walked forward. With each step he took, a large number of blood shadow insects were shaken off his body. Before they could even land on the ground, they had already turned into regulations and dissipated. This was not a physical body, but rather a manifestation of Old Demon Blood Shadow's divided soul amalgamating the regulations of heaven and earth. Old fool, don't forget that you are more or less at the Een Soul tier now. So how much power can you unleash from the black murderous curse? Ling Han said calmly. How powerful was his physique? How could a Een Soul level attack possibly kill him? Old Demon Blood Shadow's tongue was knotted, and he was completely unable to speak. Don't say it so easily. Even if you are a 5th severance, comparable to Yang Soul, you are still a minor level lower than him. Furthermore, the black murderous curse had already been planted, and it would erupt within one's body. Even if one's cultivation realm was the same, it would still be able to easily kill one's opponent, let alone one whose cultivation realm was higher. What kind of monster had he provoked? The old man was now filled with regret. Originally, he still had a lifespan of over 100 million years. But now, his essence had been severely damaged, and then he had to burn the rest of his essence to forcefully start a battle. He had brought about his own destruction. If the heavens gave him another chance, He would definitely stay as far away from Ling Han as possible. He would kill this guy and snatch the treasures from him. Old Demon Blood Shadow increasingly felt that Ling Han definitely had an astonishing treasure on him. Otherwise, how could he possibly be so powerful? Even at a time like this, you still refuse to give up your evil intentions. Ling Han humphed and strode forward. A large number of blood shadow insects landed, and his whole person was completely revealed, standing as straight as a spear. Send you on your way. Ling Han gave a battle cry. The 9 heavens flame flared, and he turned into a god of fire, blasting madly at Old Demon Blood Shadow. King Tears were invincible at the same cultivation level, and Emperor Tears were invincible even if they surpassed 1 cultivation level. Then what about Monarch Tears? Invincible over 2 cultivation levels? Fifth Severance could be considered a different kind of Yang soul, but it was ultimately not a Yang soul, so it would definitely affect Ling Han's ability to battle surpassing cultivation levels. Thus, against a dividing soul tier, he still could not be invincible over 2 cultivation levels, but surpassing 1 cultivation level was a piece of cake. What more when Old Demon Blood Shadow was already at the end of his rope? Now that he had gone all out, Old Demon Blood Shadow immediately fell into a disadvantageous position. Don't kill me, Old Demon Blood Shadow wailed. I don't have many years left to live either. Let me live, and let me deal with my funeral affairs. Ling Han only felt that this was inconceivable. Just how thick was this old bastard's skin? He even dared to say such words. He was shameless to the point that he had no bottom line. But thinking about it again, this old bastard had previously ambushed him, cursed him, and stolen the natural peach seal for him, which was already enough to prove his shamelessness. You'd better be on your way soon, lest you go and bring disaster to others. Ling Han was merciless, every punch taking his life. This old man will fight it out with you. Old Demon Blood Shadow exploded with the last bit of his life force. But even so, he was still no match for Ling Han, and was still being suppressed. And his life force was pitifully little in the first place, so this kind of desperate fight would only be a flash in the pan, and very soon, it would wither away. This old man hates. The old bastard also knew that he could not hold on any longer, and roared 3 times in fury towards the skies. He simply gave up resisting. You claim to be a prodigy of your generation, and you have the nerve to make a move against someone who does not fight back. Fuck. At first, Ling Han had thought that he already knew the bottom limit of this old bastard's shamelessness, and had never thought that the latter would be able to break through again. If he could not win, then so be it, but he actually said so confidently that he would not fight back. What kind of shamelessness did he have to be able to say that? He could not be bothered to reprimand him, and simply delivered a punch in his direction. You die early and reincarnate early. Although he said that he did not fight back, when the punch arrived, Old Demon Blood Shadow still took a step back, and stretched out a hand to parry. To say nothing of Ling Han, even Yin Xianlu, and the others did not know what to say. This old bastard had once been an ascending origin tier elite. At any rate, so how could he be so shameless? Shamelessness to the point of shaking the heavens and earth. Disgusting. Ling Han's fiery fist shot out continuously, and after a dozen or so punches, Old Demon Blood Shadow was blasted into smithereens. Old Demon Blood Shadow's remnant soul still had not dissipated, and was drifting in the air, filled with a longing for life, but the remnant soul had no one to rely on, and very soon, it completely dissipated, completely erased from this world. Ling Han, let's go play. Hunyo ran over, and hooked one of Ling Han's arms, a brilliant smile on her face. The Empress also walked over, and hooked her arm around Ling Han's other arm to show her sovereignty. In front of other women, the Empress had always been calm, but Hunyo indeed made her feel pressured. Big Vixen, hurry up and let go of Nyo's Ling Han. Hunyo was jealous. The Empress only swept a disdainful glance over, and ignored her. She had no interest in arguing with this kind of little girl. Why Nyo is so angry. Hunyo flew into a rage, a fierce glint in her eyes, killing intent soaring. Ling Han could only mediate, and pacify Hunyo. Brother Ling, you are going to be very busy, so I will make it short. There are about 10 years' time until the mystery realm opens, so you should prepare well. If you can reach the peak stage of the fifth severance before then, that would be best, Yin Xianlu said. He then added, do not underestimate the prodigies of the wide prosperity heaven. You can only match them if you reach the peak stage of the fifth severance. Previously, he had exchanged 10 moves with Ling Han, and he felt that he had a slight upper hand, but even he was no match for Shi Xiuwen, so Ling Han naturally could not possibly be a match for him. Ling Han only nodded, and did not say that his strongest aspect was actually his physique. Furthermore, he had not used the 2 source powers of heaven and earth, the 9 heavens flame and Xianin source water, as well as the 3 supreme regulations of the Black Tower. The other was right. He indeed had to reach the peak stage of the fifth severance as soon as possible. If he could avoid borrowing external power, then it was best not to. Then goodbye at the 3 Flowers Valley. Chapter 1938. Ling Han held the Empress and Hunyou's hands and left. Lu Herong, meanwhile, could not stand Hunyou's closeness towards Ling Han, and hid in the shadows. However, as long as Hunyou was in danger, she would definitely appear at the first instant. Oh, that's right. Ling Han smacked his head, and with a shake of his right hand, he tossed Bewitching Maiden Ro out from his spatial god tool. Though this bewitching maiden could come out herself, she did not know the situation outside. If she was still on 3 Yang Peak, it was possible that she would die the moment she came out. Bewitching Maiden Ro was startled at first, and then looked at Ling Han with a strange gaze. This guy actually gave her such a precious treasure without any conditions, and did not even ask for a word of thanks from her. This actually made her feel incredibly moved. After so many days, she naturally had already refined the heavenly Dao Jade, and made up for all the deficiencies on her path of cultivation. From striking herself, she had become striking the heaven and earth, and become an emperor tier, and a top-grade emperor tier at that. However, she immediately looked surprised because she had noticed Hunyou. There was actually an exceptional beauty that could rival the Empress in this world. Yet Hunyou's jealousy soared. She glared fiercely at Bewitching Maiden Ro and said, Ling Han, you're so bad. Not only did you get a great bewitching maiden, you also got a vixen. Ling Han smiled and said, don't mess around, she's just a friend. Bewitching Maiden Ro revealed a meaningful smile and said, oh, just a friend? This smile was seductive to the bone. Vixen, if you dare to smile again, I'll chop off your fox head. Hunyou said angrily. Young Master Ling, she's so fierce. Bewitching Maiden Ro said, and even deliberately hid behind Ling Han, looking very delicate. Damn it, Hunyou shouted in anger, a vicious look on her face. Don't tease her, be careful not to play yourself to death, the Empress said. Even she did not have the confidence to defeat Hunyou. What more a weak opponent like Bewitching Maiden Ro? She said this because Hunyou really knew how to kill, and she did not want Ling Han to lose a superb cultivation furnace. Bewitching Maiden Ro was also slightly regretful. Hunyou's eyes and expression were definitely fierce and threatening, and she was not joking. However, she was also slightly unconvinced. Aside from the fact that she had not advanced into the fifth severance, she was definitely a top-tier being in the severing mundane tier. There was no need to fear Tigress. She can suppress you with a single finger. Ling Han nodded. Hunyou is a fifth severance, so she might be slightly more powerful than me. After all, he had only just advanced into the fifth severance. Yet Hunyou was already at the peak stage of the fifth severance. Fifth severance instantly, Bewitching Maiden Ro could only be convinced. What she cultivated was charm techniques, and charm techniques were not only used to seduce men. She spoke eloquently, picking out all the things that Hunyou liked, such as how much Ling Han liked her, and how much he missed her. Instantly, the little girl grinned widely. Vixen, don't think that Hunyou doesn't know that you are flattering me, but you are still pleasing to the eye, so I'll spare you this once, Hunyou said casually. She was not stupid at all. Ling Han also let out the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, which naturally made Hunyou jealous again. Only after being hugged and comforted by Ling Han for a good while did her anger subside. After all, they had been separated for too long. and what she felt in her heart was even more yearning. Meanwhile, the two children made Hunyeo laugh loudly and exclaimed that they were very interesting. They returned to Alchemy City. With the dragon hawk as a means of transportation, their speed naturally increased greatly, and they returned to Alchemy City after more than a month. Ling Han went to visit Grandmaster Zicheng, and after a simple explanation of the situation, he began to cultivate in seclusion again. There were too many things that he had to busy himself with. Firstly, he had to increase his prowess in alchemy and advance into the 3-star tier as soon as possible. Secondly, he also had to cultivate martial art and reach the peak stage of the 5th severance. After the trip to the mystery realm, he was going to break through to the dividing soul tier. In the celestial realm, one had to go to a special place to advance to every major tier, and in the case of the dividing soul tier, one had to go to different places to break through to the 4 minor tiers. Unlike the severing mundane tier, which only needed to be broken through after the 1st severance, and there was no need to go. Like the severing mundane tier, there were also many places that could break through to the dividing soul tier, and breaking through in different places would also have a great impact on one's future battle prowess. Thus, he definitely had to choose the best place to break through to. Ling Han was already beginning to study this problem. With the help of the Black Tower and the reincarnation tree, this day should not be too far away. From time to time, the Empress and Hunyeo would bicker with each other, both wanting to suppress the other. This was especially the case for Hunyeo. There were several times when she wanted to secretly make a move and kill the Empress. Thankfully, Ling Han stopped her. The two women fought, and it was naturally Hunyeo who won, and the advantage was not just a little big. Firstly, the Empress had just advanced into the 5th severance, and secondly, it was true that Hunyeo was stronger in terms of celestial techniques, physique, and martial art, so the Empress's loss was not undeserved. However, after this battle, the enmity between the two women had dissipated. Though they could not be considered good sisters, they had reached some kind of tacit understanding and no longer fought with each other every day. Ling Han relaxed and focused on refining alchemical pills to break through to the peak stage of the 5th severance. In the Black Tower, there were now 3 more supreme regulations. Unfortunately, this could only be comprehended by Ling Han himself and could not be shared with others, which made Ling Han slightly disappointed. However, the Black Tower now also had the power of time, and the flow of time could be accelerated by 1,000 times, which was extremely astonishing. Though there were still 10 years, considering the distance and the like, he would have to set out a little earlier, so it could be considered as about 9 years. 9 years. The time for comprehending Tao was close to 330,000 years, and the time acceleration was also as high as 9,000 years, which was an extremely long time. Bewitching Maiden Ro could also be considered to have passed the test, so Ling Han also threw her into the Black Tower. Towards friends, Ling Han was never stingy. Surprisingly, Lu Herong did not appear to stop them, but would occasionally appear at Ling Han's residence, looking at the place where the Black Tower was, pondering. After 7 years in real time, Ling Han still could not break through to 3-star alchemist, but in terms of spirit refinement, he had a breakthrough and advanced into the level of 3rd refinement. The higher one went, whether it was in martial art or alchemy, it was far too difficult to improve. Ling Han had to admit that a 3-star alchemist was still quite valuable. It was no wonder that 4th refinement was the lifetime limit for most alchemists, and even he found it difficult to improve after spending so much time. However, if other alchemists knew that he was complaining like this, they would definitely be so angry that their mouths would twist. You only used a few 100,000 years at most, and you actually dared to complain? Then how would the majority of alchemists endure this? 9 years later, Ling Han and the others exited the Black Tower. Celestials naturally could not have any changes in their appearance. And sure you had very obviously grown into the appearance of teenagers. They did not use time acceleration, or they would have long since become adults. Ling Han did not want them to miss out on their childhood, or at least advance into 20 years under the normal flow of time. Only 9 years had passed in the outside world, so there naturally could not be any changes in Alchemy City, and those former holy sons and holy daughters also kept a very low profile, with Grandmaster Zicheng watching over. Who would dare act recklessly? Ling Han prepared to set out, but before he could set out, he was called over by Grandmaster Zicheng. Come, let me introduce you. This is your junior nephew, Grandmaster Zicheng said with a smile, pointing at a middle-aged man in front of him. He pointed at a middle-aged man in front of him and said, Peng Huanyan, third's disciple. He's already a 3-star alchemist. Chapter 1940. Ling Han's expression darkened, and he said, Peng Huanyan, for third senior brother's sake, I will not argue with you, but you should also know your own limits, and do not make things difficult for yourself. Haha. Peng Huanyan laughed coldly. Ling Han, do you think that you are qualified to ride on my head, just because you have become Grandmaster Zicheng's disciple? I have tolerated you for a long time, but you are just a brat. What are you pretending for? He was jealous of Ling Han. What aspect did the latter have that was superior to him, yet could become Alchemist Zicheng's disciple, and even become his legacy disciple? Furthermore, this brat had 4 beauties by his side, all of them exceptionally beautiful, each with their own unique characteristics. In terms of martial art strength, he was in the dividing soul tier, and in terms of alchemy, he was a 3-star alchemist, which aspect was inferior to Ling Han. He was not convinced. On what basis? Ling Han, Niu wants to beat him up. Hu Niu was the first to be unable to hold back, and was about to step forward to fight, and the Empress's expression was also cold. She similarly could not stand others being rude to Ling Han, making her feel the same way. Peng Huanyan was not the slightest bit afraid. These people were only severing mundane tier, and he was a Yang Soul elite. Could it be that they were all heaven-defying freaks on the level of 5th severance that could battle him? Wasn't that a joke? Grandmaster. At this moment, a young man walked out quickly from the city, dressed in crimson embroidered clothing, extremely ostentatious. His looks were not bad, his figure slender, and he was a very handsome man. When it was this young man, the guards hurriedly saluted. This young man was not simple. Not only was he Peng Huanyan's grand disciple, he was also the young master of the city's noble Missouri clan, a figure that could make the earth tremble with the stamp of his feet. His name was Emo Shuang. Emo Shuang. Peng Huanyan nodded with a smile, seeming to value this grand disciple very much. This was natural. The Emo clan was an ascending origin tier force, the strongest below Celestial King tier, and he was only a 3-star alchemist. In front of the Emo clan, he could only be said to have some status, and was not qualified to put on airs. Alchemists indeed had a transcendent status, but this status was given by cultivators. In front of the Emo clan, what difference was there between an alchemist and a passerby? For example, the Emo family was someone that Peng Huanyan needed to curry favor with. Although Emo Shuang appeared respectful on the surface, there was a trace of arrogance in his eyes. Although he had become Grandmaster Zhu Feng's disciple, his true strength lay in his martial art. As for alchemy, that was just for fun. Moreover, Guanhua City had this kind of atmosphere. Geniuses of martial art would all try to get involved with alchemy to add a little more glory to their reputation. Grandmaster, this person is. He looked at Ling Han, his voice filled with 30% doubt and 70% disdain. Oh, this is just a minor character who came to congratulate your ancestral master for breaking through to the 6th refinement. Peng Huanyan said faintly. With outsiders present, it was absolutely impossible for him to address Ling Han as martial uncle. Taiyan heavens, he added. Taiyan sky. The sneer on Emo Shuang's face became even more pronounced. Who didn't know that the Taiyan heaven was the weakest among the 33 heavens of the Eastern Celestial Realm? In the past, there had still been the Wide Prosperity Heaven and the Far South Heaven, but in the last few 100 million years, the martial art of the Wide Prosperity Heaven and the Far South Heaven had developed by leaps and bounds, and had already left the Taiyan heaven far behind. In the hearts of the cultivators of the Wide Prosperity Heaven, the Taiyan heaven was synonymous with weaklings. Thus, if everyone's cultivation level was the same, then it was naturally the cultivators of the wide prosperity heaven who could easily win. However, while the Taiyan heaven was weak, it seemed to abound in exquisite beauties. He looked at Hunyeo, then at the Empress, and then at bewitching Maiden Ro. He felt that the three women each had their own strengths. One was beautiful and pure, one did not show her features, but was exceptionally beautiful, and the last was incredibly charming, each and every one of her movements causing one's heart to itch. Grandmaster, it seems like this person is slightly disrespectful towards you, Emo Shuang said. He was secretly delighted. This was a rare opportunity to act up. If he humiliated Ling Han in public, what would these beauties think? The Taiyan heaven was really weak. 3 exquisite beauties were actually following such a good-for-nothing. Peng Huanyan calmly said. He is merely a young man who does not know the immensity of heaven and earth. In front of this junior, he naturally had to maintain the reserved demeanor of a high-grade alchemist. However, firstly, he was indeed respecting his own status, and secondly, Ling Han was Grandmaster Zicheng's disciple, and was his uncle. If he personally made a move against Ling Han, Grandmaster Zhu Feng would definitely not spare him. But Emo Shuang was different. Firstly, he was not guilty of ignorance, and secondly, the Emo clan was also a great force. How could it be that Zhu Feng would turn hostile against the Emo clan? Thus, if Emo Shuang gave Ling Han a beating, then Ling Han was destined to have no choice but to swallow this loss in silence. When Emo Shuang heard this, he immediately made a decision. Peng Huanyan disliked Ling Han very much, but because of his own status, it was not appropriate for him to make a move. Thus, he only spoke disdainfully, yet was subtly encouraging him to make a move. That was exactly what he wanted. Brat, quickly kneel and apologize to my grandmaster. Emo Shuang pointed a finger at Ling Han, his tone filled with a commanding tone. He really looked down on the people of the Taiyan heaven. He had heard that there were only 2 or 3 monarch tiers, unlike their wide prosperity heaven. Just this Guanhua city alone had such a supreme monarch tier. Lujia, a prodigy among men. Ling Han waved his hand, indicating that the Empress and the others should not be agitated. Leave this matter to him. He looked at Emo Shuang smilingly, and said, Brat, has no one ever taught you not to be used as a tool by others? Brat, do you think that you are my senior? Emo Shuang was instantly seething with anger. Ling Han's vitality and flame of life all showed that the latter was younger than him, and by a lot. But this guy actually dared to call him brat? Fuck. What a cheap mouth. I'll teach you a lesson first. Emo Shuang brazenly moved. His strength was really extraordinary. As a young master of an ascending origin tier clan, it was enough to squeeze into the ranks of emperor tiers. Ling Han nodded internally. No wonder it was said that the wide prosperity heaven had received the blessing of the heaven and earth. Any random severing mundane tier they encountered was an emperor tier, which showed how high the level of martial art in the entire wide prosperity heaven was. However, what was a mere 4th severance in front of him? Ling Han clasped his hands behind his back, and his feet moved casually, easily dodging Emo Shuang's attack. On the basis that they were from the same sect, and he was also his senior, Ling Han decided that he would not make it too difficult for the other to lose. Moreover, Emo Shuang was young and rash, and was only being used by Peng Huanyan as a tool. Boom boom boom. Emo Shuang consecutively launched over a dozen moves, but did not even touch a corner of Ling Han's clothes. His face involuntarily flushed red, his eyes burning with endless fury. He felt that he could suppress Ling Han with a single move and embarrass him. Then, he would be able to determine who was superior with the Empress and the other beauties. But after these few moves, his efforts were all in vain. Conversely, Ling Han's figure was graceful, and he was incredibly calm. With this comparison, it was clear that Ling Han had the upper hand. He felt that his face had lost all face, and then a blazing fury rose up. Brother Emo, you've met your match." There was a long laugh, and a group of 7 people walked in from outside the city. There were 5 men and 2 women, and they were all dragons and phoenixes among men. The men were handsome and bold, while the women were as dainty and beautiful as flowers. The one who spoke was a man, and he carried a large purple bow on his back. He was slightly taller than he was, and he walked with a majestic gait, exuding an awe-inspiring heroic spirit. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.